The sun begins its slow ascent over the turquoise-tiled skyline of Isfahan, the golden light of 1602 stretching long fingers across the city's dust-mote-filled workshops. We find ourselves in a sanctuary of patience, a high-ceilinged room where time is not measured by the frantic ticking of a clock, but by the steady, rhythmic movement of a wooden shuttle. Sunlight filters through high-arched windows, casting slanted pillars of gold onto the cool stone floor. Within these beams of light, millions of tiny dust particles dance in a weightless ballet, swirling around the massive timber frame of a vertical loom. The air is thick with a unique perfume, the dry organic scent of sheep's wool and raw silk, mingled with the earthy aroma of natural vegetable dyes and a faint, lingering sweetness of rosewater from a nearby basin. There is no urgency here. The world outside may be bustling with the commerce of the Silk Road and the grand ambitions of Shah Abbas, but inside these walls, the only thing that matters is the singular, focused tension of the warp threads. The loom itself is a magnificent structure of weathered oak, its beams smoothed by the touch of generations of artisans. Stretched tight across it are thousands of fine silk threads, as white and delicate as a spider's web, yet vibrating with a hidden strength. Sitting on a low, carpeted bench is the weaver. His movements are fluid, almost liquid, a testament to a lifetime of repetition. He reaches for a strand of silk that has been dyed a deep, regal crimson, a colour born from the roots of the madder plant. With a flick of his wrist, he loops the thread around two warp strands, ties a precise Persian knot, and snips the ends with a small curved blade. The sound is a sharp, satisfying click that punctuates the silence. Each knot is a tiny decision, a minuscule building block of a grand design that will not be fully realized for many months to come. To look at him is to see a man in a state of total presence. He is not thinking of the finished masterpiece nor the payment it will bring, but only of the integrity of this one single knot. The silence of the workshop is not absolute. It is a layered tapestry of sound. The most prominent is the rhythmic thud-clack of the heavy metal comb. After each row of knots is completed, the weaver uses this tool to beat the threads down, packing them tightly against the foundation of the carpet. This sound is the heartbeat of the room, steady, heavy, and grounding. It resonates in the chest, a reminder of the physical labor required to create something of eternal beauty. Between these strikes, you can hear the soft, distant murmur of the city. Isfahan is a city of water, and the faint splashing of a marble fountain in the courtyard outside provides a melodic counterpoint to the weaver's work. The water sings of the mountains and the desert oases, while the loom speaks of the earth and the hand. As the morning progresses, the light shifts, moving across the partially finished carpet. The intricate patterns of the Isfahan style begin to shimmer, delicate arabesques, swirling floral motifs, and the legendary Shah Abbas palmettes that seem to grow organically from the silk. The colors are vibrant yet sophisticated, indigo blues as deep as the midnight sky over the Zagros peaks, saffron yellows that glow with the intensity of the sun, and forest greens that offer a visual rest for the eyes. Each color has been carefully chosen and prepared in large copper vats, fermented with dried limes and mineral salts to ensure they never fade. In this light, the silk takes on a life of its own, reflecting the golden rays so that the carpet appears to be woven from light itself. The weaver pauses for a moment, not out of fatigue, but to appreciate the way the sun catches a particular curve of a leaf in the pattern. He takes a slow breath, the scent of the dyes grounding him in the moment, before returning to the next knot. This is the essence of 1602 Isfahan, a devotion to the process, a surrender to the rhythm of the loom, and the quiet understanding that greatness is grown one thread at a time. The weaver's hands continue their tireless journey, moving across the loom with the grace of a musician playing a silent instrument. Each movement is a testament to the long lineage of artisans who came before him, those who perfected the art of the knot in the high plateaus of Persia. As the sun moves higher, the shadows in the workshop begin to shorten, and the golden rectangles on the floor shift toward the center of the room. The heat of the day is kept at bay by the thick mud brick walls and the clever architecture of the high vaults, which allow the warm air to rise and escape. This creates a natural coolness that smells faintly of old stone and dampened earth. The weaver reaches for a new color now. A strand of silk dyed with indigo, fermented for weeks until it reached a blue so dark it looks almost black in the shadows, yet reveals a brilliant sapphire brilliance when caught by a direct ray of light. There is a profound sense of isolation here, a detachment from the rapid flow of history. While the Shah's architects are busy erecting the Great Mosque, and while caravans from China and Venice trade spices and glass in the sprawling Maidan, the weaver exists in a world of millimeters. He follows the pattern chart, the talim, which is written in a rhythmic, poetic code. To an outsider, it looks like a cryptic map, but to him, it is a song. He whispers the colors to himself as he works 2 reds, 1 gold, 3 blues, a mantra that keeps his mind aligned with the mathematical precision of the design. The complexity is staggering. In every square inch of this carpet there are hundreds of individual knots, each one a tiny point of color in a vast woven galaxy. The physical sensation of the workshop is one of tactile richness. The weaver's fingers are stained slightly blue and red from the silk. The dyes having seeped into his skin over years of labor, he feels the tension of the warp threads, the way they resist and then yield as he pulls the knots tight beneath his feet. The remnants of silk clippings form a soft, colorful dust that muffles his footsteps when he occasionally stands to stretch his legs. On a small side table, a copper tray holds a glass of tea, now lukewarm, and a small plate of dried figs and walnuts. The tea is dark and strong, flavored with a single pod of cardamom, its scent providing a sharp, spicy contrast to the mellow aroma of the rosewater. He takes a sip, the liquid warming his throat, and gazes at the work he has completed this morning. It is barely an inch of progress, yet it is an inch of perfection. The rhythm of the thud-clack returns, a grounding heartbeat that vibrates through the wooden bench and into the weaver's very bones. It is a sound that signals to anyone passing by in the alleyway that the work is proceeding as it should. There is a deep meditative peace in this repetition. In the modern world, repetition is often seen as a burden, a sign of monotony. But here, in 1602, repetition is the path to the divine. Each strike of the comb is an act of devotion, a way of ensuring that the beauty he creates is structural, not just superficial. The carpet is not merely a floor covering, it is a garden brought indoors, a reflection of the paradise promised in the ancient texts, where flowers never wither and the light never fades. As the mid-morning breeze picks up, it carries with it the sound of the muezzin's call from a distant minaret, the melodic Arabic drifting over the rooftops and into the workshop. The weaver does not stop, but his movements seem to synchronize with the prayer. The world outside is a symphony of faith and commerce, but here the faith is found in the silk. The sunlight catches the dust motes again, and for a moment the entire room seems to be suspended in a golden amber. You can almost feel the weight of the silk as it grows heavier at the bottom of the loom, the physical manifestation of months of quiet, unhurried thought. The weaver's world is small, but it is infinite in its detail. Every leaf in the pattern has a vein, every flower has a heart, and as he ties the next knot, he is not just weaving a carpet, he is weaving the very fabric of peace. The sun has now reached its zenith, hanging directly above the high vaults of the workshop. The light, once slanted and dramatic, now pours straight down from the circular apertures in the ceiling, illuminating the very center of the loom like a stage. This is the hour when the colors are truest. Without the long shadows of the morning, the deep vermilion, the burnt orange, and the delicate cream of the silk reveal their hidden depths. The weaver pauses for a moment to wipe his brow with a linen cloth. His eyes, though tired from the intense focus on the microscopic knots, remain sharp. He looks at the section he has just completed, a series of interlocking vines that curve with such fluidity, it is hard to believe they are composed of thousands of straight, stiff threads. This is the magic of the Isfahan craft, the ability to turn a grid of vertical and horizontal lines into a flowing organic garden of the mind. Around him, the workshop holds its breath in the midday heat. The air has become warmer, carrying the scent of sun-baked bricks and the dry metallic tang of the copper vats kept in the dyeing shed across the courtyard. A small sparrow flutters down from the rafters, chirping softly as it hops across the stone floor, searching for a stray seed or a crumb of the weaver's walnut. It is a tiny living interruption in this temple of industry. The weaver watches it with a thin smile, appreciative of the life that exists outside his meticulous grid. He realizes that, much like the bird, he is a small part of a much larger ecosystem, a city that breathes through its artisans, its poets, and its priests. The carpet he creates will one day grace the marble floor of a grand palace, or perhaps find its way across the desert to a distant land, carrying the sunlight of this Isfahan afternoon with it forever. He returns to his task, selecting a thread of pale turquoise. This color is particularly difficult to achieve, requiring a precise balance of copper salts and a specific temperature during the dyeing process. It is the color of the domes that dominate the Isfahan skyline, a hue that bridges the gap between the earth and the heavens. As he works this thread into the border of a palmette, the rhythmic thud-clack of the comb resumes. It is a slower tempo now, matching the languid heat of the afternoon. The sound echoes against the high ceiling, a steady pulse that seems to regulate the very temperature of the room. Every strike of the comb is a promise kept, a promise that this carpet will be tight enough to resist the footsteps of a century, that its foundation will remain true even as the world outside changes beyond recognition. There is a specific geometry to his piece. He follows the talim with a reverence that borders on the religious. To miss a single knot, to misplace one shade of green for another, would be to break the harmony of the entire universe he is constructing. But he does not fear error. He trusts his hands. They have a wisdom of their own, a tactile intelligence that knows exactly how much tension to apply to the silk. He feels the coolness of the turquoise thread against his calloused thumb, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the air. This tactile feedback is his constant companion, a silent dialogue between the creator and the material. The silk is not a passive thing. It has its own character, its own way of catching the light, and its own subtle resistance that requires a firm yet gentle touch. In the corner of the workshop, the shadow of the loom begins to stretch again, marking the transition into the afternoon. The thud-clack continues, a metronome for a life lived in the pursuit of excellence. The weaver's focus remains unbroken, even as the distant sounds of the city change, the cries of the market-goers softening as the midday heat encourages a collective siesta. But for the weaver there is no siesta. There is only the next row, the next color, and the next knot. He is a man caught in the beautiful trap of his own skill, weaving a piece of history that will outlive him, one tiny sun-drenched thread at a time. The room smells of rosewater, the dust motes continue their slow descent, and the carpet grows, an inch of silent, shimmering beauty in the heart of the Persian Empire. As the afternoon progresses, the sun begins its gradual descent, casting a richer, more amber glow through the workshop. The weaver's shadow grows long and thin, stretching across the stone floor like a dark needle pointing toward the finished portion of the carpet. The heat of the day has peaked and is now beginning to mellow, replaced by a gentle breeze that carries the scent of blooming jasmine from a nearby terrace. The weaver moves his fingers with a renewed sense of rhythm. He is currently working on the central medallion, the most complex part of the entire composition. This is the heart of the garden, a starburst of intricate geometry that requires absolute concentration. One wrong knot here could distort the symmetry of the entire piece, yet he works with a calmness that suggests he is merely following a path already laid out by the stars. The thud-clack of the comb sounds again, echoing with a hollow wooden resonance that fills the quiet space. Each strike is a declaration of permanence. In a world where so much is fleeting, where empires rise and fall, and where even the strongest stone eventually turns to sand, this silk carpet remains an anchor. It is a physical manifestation of a man's time, a tangible record of thousands of hours spent in the pursuit of a single beautiful goal. The weaver pauses to adjust his position on the bench, feeling the slight ache in his shoulders. He doesn't mind the fatigue. It is a familiar friend, the price of creation. He reaches for a glass of water, now cool and refreshing, and watches the way the light plays across the surface of the silk. The The carpet seems to ripple like the surface of a pond, the light catching the different directions of the pile. If you are finding peace in the rhythmic world of 1602 Isfahan, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue weaving these historical tales of tranquility. Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which era of history brings you the most calm. Your engagement is the thread that keeps our storytelling loom spinning. The weaver returns to his silk skeins, selecting a thread of pale almond green. This color represents the first buds of spring, a symbol of hope and renewal. He loops it into the design, his curved blade flashing as it trims the excess. The sound of the city outside has shifted. The calls of the afternoon vendors have become more melodic, and the laughter of children playing near the fountains drifts through the high windows. Inside the workshop, the air remains still, a pocket of timelessness. The weaver's world is one of intense detail, the way a single thread of indigo can deepen a red, or how a touch of cream silk can make a flower appear to lift off the surface of the fabric. He is a master of illusions, using thousands of tiny points of color to create a world that feels more real than the stone walls surrounding him. The dust motes in the air have turned to flecks of gold in the late afternoon light. They settle on the weaver's hair and shoulders, as if trying to become part of the masterpiece themselves. He strikes the comb once more. Thud, 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 and the silk is packed down tight, locking the colors into place for the next 500 years. There is no hurry to reach the end. The beauty is not just in the finished carpet, but in this very moment. The smell of the wool, the sound of the fountain, and the quiet, steady repetition of a craft that demands everything and gives back a sense of total, unshakable peace. The amber light of the late afternoon has deepened into a rich, honeyed bronze, bathing the workshop in a warmth that feels almost tangible. This is the hour of transition, where the sharp lines of the day begin to blur and the workshop feels more like a dream than a place of industry. The weaver's hands have not slowed, though his pace has adopted a more lyrical quality. He is working on the fine outlines of a slender cypress motif, a symbol of eternity and strength in Persian art. The silk he uses for this is a green so dark it is nearly black, providing a crisp border to the lighter, shimmering emerald of the tree's interior. Each knot is tied with a subtle pull, ensuring the tension is uniform across the entire width of the loom, a skill that separates the master from the apprentice. The thud-clack of the comb now carries a different resonance, a deeper tone that seems to vibrate through the very foundations of the building. It is the sound of the day's work settling into place. The weaver pauses to look at the pile of the carpet, running his hand over the finished section. It feels like the pelt of a mythical animal, soft, cool, and incredibly dense. The way the light hits the silk creates a changement effect, where the colors appear to shift and transform as one moves past the loom. A flower that looked crimson a moment ago now glows with a hint of violet. A leaf that appeared gold now shines with a metallic brilliance. This is the reward for his patience, the creation of a living surface that breathes with the light. In the corner of the room, the charcoal samovar begins to hiss softly, a plume of steam rising toward the high ceiling. The sound is like a gentle sigh, a signal that the day's labor is drawing toward its natural conclusion. The weaver reaches for a small bowl of pomegranate seeds, their tart sweetness a brief distraction from the intensity of his focus. He watches the way the red juice stains his fingertips, a temporary dye that will be gone by morning, unlike the silk that will carry his mark for centuries. The workshop has grown quieter. Even the birds in the rafters have settled into a hushed anticipation of the evening. The air is still save for the rhythmic movement of the weaver and the distant cooling splash of the courtyard water. There is a profound dignity in this silence. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fulfillment. Every row of knots represents a day of a life lived with purpose. The weaver looks at the empty warp threads stretching upward toward the top beam, thousands of them still waiting to be filled. He does not feel overwhelmed by the work ahead, rather he feels a sense of comfort in the continuity. The loom is a bridge between the past and the future, and he is the one walking across it thread by thread. The dust motes have slowed their dance, hanging suspended in the golden air like tiny stars, witness to a craft that requires the heart of a poet and the hands of a labourer. As the sun dips lower, the first hints of purple and indigo begin to bleed into the golden light. The shadows of the arched windows stretch across the loom, momentarily obscuring the pattern. The weaver leans in closer, his eyes following the lines by touch as much as by sight. He knows this garden by heart. He has walked these silken paths 1,000 times in his mind before a single knot was ever tied. The rhythmic thud of the comb sounds one last time for this hour, a solid grounding beat that echoes through the room. The day is fading, but the carpet has grown by a few more rows, a tiny but significant victory against the passage of time. In this space, peace is not an abstract concept, it is something you can touch, something you can weave, and something that smells of silk and sun-warmed wood. The transition from late afternoon to early evening brings a profound stillness to the workshop. The vibrant, fiery oranges have softened into a pale, dusty rose, and the long shadows have merged into a soft, uniform twilight that fills the corners of the room. The weaver's movements have become slower, more deliberate, as if he is savouring the final knots of the day. The thud-clack of the comb is now a gentle heartbeat, muffled by the gathering darkness and the thick pile of the silk already woven. This is the time when the workshop feels most sacred, a place where the physical world of thread and wood touches the spiritual world of intention and peace. The weaver doesn't need much light now. His fingers know the way, guided by the thousands of repetitions that have defined his life. The air has cooled significantly, and the scent of the city's evening cooking, charcoal-grilled meats and saffron rice, drifts in through the high windows, mingling with the ever-present fragrance of rosewater. The weaver takes a final look at the section he has completed today. It is a small patch of beauty, a few square inches of floral perfection that did not exist when the sun rose this morning. He feels a quiet sense of pride, not the boisterous pride of a conqueror, but the humble satisfaction of a gardener who has successfully nurtured a delicate bloom. The carpet is a little longer, the story a little fuller. He knows that when he returns tomorrow, the morning light will reveal his work in a new way, and the cycle of creation will begin all over again. He begins the ritual of closing the workshop. He carefully covers the loom with a heavy linen cloth to protect the delicate silk from the night's dust. He gathers his tools, the curved knife, the heavy comb, and the shears, and places them in a wooden box worn smooth by his touch. Each tool is treated with respect, for they are the extensions of his will. He extinguishes the small charcoal fire under the samovar, the final hiss of steam signalling the end of the day's labour. The workshop is now silent, save for the faint, rhythmic splashing of the fountain in the courtyard, which seems to grow louder in the absence of the loom's cadence. As he prepares to leave, he stands for a moment in the centre of the room, looking up at the high, vaulted ceiling. The first stars are beginning to appear through the circular openings, tiny points of light that mirror the knots on his loom. He realizes that his work is a reflection of this celestial order, a search for harmony amidst the complexity of the world. He steps out into the cool evening air of Isfahan, the stone floor still radiating a faint warmth from the day's sun. Behind him, the workshop remains a silent witness to his devotion, a sanctuary where the golden threads of 1602 continue to shimmer in the dark, waiting for the return of the light. Sleepy History with Tales is a sleep history storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. The weaver has departed, but the workshop does not feel empty. It remains a vessel of potential, a space charged with the lingering energy of focused creation. In the deep violet of the Isfahan night, the loom stands like a silent sentinel. The linen shroud covering the carpet ripples slightly in a stray draught, a ghost of the day's activity. Outside, the city has transformed. The frantic energy of the bazaar has smoothed into the low hum of family gatherings and the soft chanting from the nearby madrasas. The moon, a silver crescent echoing the weaver's blade, rises over the turquoise domes, casting a cool ethereal glow through the high windows. This silver light finds the gaps in the linen, catching the edges of the silk threads until they shimmer like frozen moonlight. Deep within the fibers of the carpet, the history of 1602 is being preserved. Every thread of silk carries the memory of the hands that dyed it and the sun that dried it. The indigo, harvested from the plains and fermented in clay vats, holds the depth of the Persian night. The madder root, crushed and boiled, holds the heat of the earth. These are not merely materials, they are elements of the landscape woven into a portable garden. Even in the darkness, the carpet seems to possess a weight of its own, a density of spirit. It is the result of a philosophy that prizes the eternal over the immediate. In this era, beauty is considered a form of truth, and to create something beautiful is to offer a prayer to the creator of all things. As the night deepens, the temperature in the workshop drops, and the smell of the rosewater in the basin becomes more pronounced, sharpened by the cool air. The silence is thick and textured. If one were to listen closely, they might imagine the silk threads settling, the thousands of knots tightening as the natural fibers react to the humidity of the night. This is the quiet setting of the work. The loom itself, made of ancient timber, groans once, a low wooden creak that speaks of the immense tension it holds. It is a living thing, an accomplice in the weaver's quest for perfection. It bears the strain so the silk can remain graceful. The city of Isfahan breathes in a slow, steady rhythm. Far off, a night watchman's footsteps echo on the cobblestones, a rhythmic tap-tap that mimics the weaver's comb. The fountains continue their tireless work, the water recycling through marble channels, a reminder of the Sultan's power to bring life to the desert. The weaver, now resting in his home nearby, perhaps dreams of the pattern. Artisans of this caliber often speak of seeing the carpet behind their eyelids, a phantom loom where the knots tie themselves in an endless, perfect loop. His rest is well earned, for his body has been the bridge through which an idea became a physical reality. Inside the workshop, the dust motes have finally settled, resting on the beams and the floor like a fine layer of time. The workshop waits. It waits for the first hint of grey on the horizon, for the call of the morning bird, and for the return of the hands that turn silk into dreams. There is no anxiety in this waiting. The carpet will not be finished tomorrow, nor the day after. It will be finished when it is ready, when every thread has found its place and every colour has told its part of the story. In the stillness of 1602, the world understands that some things simply cannot be rushed. The first light of dawn begins to bruise the horizon with shades of lavender and pale grey. Isfahan stirs slowly like a giant waking from a deep, peaceful slumber. In the workshop, the darkness begins to thin, retreating into the corners as the morning air brings a crisp, revitalizing chill. The weaver returns before the sun has fully cleared the rooftops. His arrival is quiet. The turn of a heavy iron key, the creak of the door, and the soft shuffle of his leather slippers on the stone. He does not rush to the loom. Instead, he begins the morning ritual, refreshing the rosewater in the bowl, lighting a small fire for his tea, and standing for a moment in the center of the room to simply breathe. He is re-entering the sanctuary, aligning his spirit with the silent work that awaits him. He pulls back the linen shroud, and the partially finished carpet is revealed once more. In the dim light, the silk looks muted, almost humble, waiting for the sun to ignite its inner fire. The weaver runs his hand over the work from yesterday, checking the tension of the warp and the evenness of the pile. He feels a deep connection to the threads, a sense of continuity that transcends the break of night. To him, the carpet is not a series of disconnected days of labor, but a single, unbroken thought that spans months. He picks up his shears and trims a few stray fibers, the metal blades whispering against the silk. Every movement is deliberate, a way of waking up his hands and reclaiming his place in the rhythm of the loom. If these stories of ancient craftsmanship help you find a sense of calm in your busy life, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. By joining our community, you help us preserve these moments of historical peace and bring more stories of tranquility to the world. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. What part of the weaver's journey resonates with you the most? As the sun finally breaks over the horizon A single beam of light strikes the high window and lances down into the room. It hits the loom, and suddenly the silk carpet erupts into life. The reds deepen into a glowing crimson, the golds shimmer like molten metal, and the blues regain their sky-like brilliance. The weaver takes his seat on the bench. The first thud of the comb echoes through the room, officially marking the start of a new day. It is a confident, grounding sound. Thud clack. Thud clack. The cadence is back. The heartbeat of Isfahan has resumed. Today he will finish the border of the central medallion and begin the long winding path of the floral vines that surround it. There is no urgency. There is only the next knot, the next breath, and the steady, peaceful repetition that builds a masterpiece. Sleepy History with Wesley combines the power of AI to reimagine fictional historical tales, bringing peace, relaxation, and positive emotional values to our listeners. The morning air remains crisp, but the growing heat of the Persian sun is already beginning to warm the outer bricks of the workshop. Inside, the weaver has entered a state of flow, that rare and precious place where the boundary between the maker and the made begins to dissolve. His fingers move with a staggering economy of motion. There is no wasted energy. Every reach for a silk thread, every twist of the wrist, and every snip of the blade is part of a seamless circular dance. The thud-clack of the comb provides the percussion for this silent ballet. To an observer, the progress might seem imperceptible, but the weaver sees the landscape growing beneath his thumbs. He is currently working on a series of tiny Shah Abbasi palmettes, each one a miniature sun with petals made of cream and saffron silk. The light in the workshop is at its most optimistic during these early hours. It is a clear, translucent yellow that makes every dust mote look like a drifting diamond. The weaver notices how the light interacts with the silk's grain. By tying the knots at a slight angle, he can control how the carpet reflects the sun, making certain flowers appear to bloom only when viewed from a specific side of the room. This is the secret knowledge of the Isfahan masters, the ability to weave light itself into the fabric. He thinks of the garden this carpet will eventually inhabit. He imagines a nobleman walking barefoot across this very section, the cool silk providing a respite from the desert heat. That future sensation is what guides his current labor. He is not just weaving for the eyes, but for the touch. In the corner, the samovar begins its cheerful bubbling, a domestic sound that anchors the high-minded art in everyday reality. The weaver pauses to pour a small glass of tea, the liquid a dark amber that matches the wood of his loom. He adds a crystal of rock sugar and stirs it slowly, watching the steam rise and vanish into the shafts of sunlight. This brief interlude is not a distraction, but a necessary recalibration. He looks out through the arched doorway into the small courtyard where a pomegranate tree is heavy with ripening fruit. The geometry of the tree, the way its branches twist and reach, is the same geometry he is translating into the silk. Nature is his primary text and the loom is his pen. The sound of the city is growing louder now. The distant clatter of a coppersmith's hammer in the bazaar adds a metallic ring to the morning air, and the rhythmic chanting of students from the nearby school drifts over the walls. These sounds are the background noise of 1602 Isfahan, a city at the height of its cultural and economic power. Yet within the workshop, these sounds are filtered through the high windows, becoming a soft, textured hum that only serves to deepen the weaver's concentration. He returns to his bench, the silk threads feeling cool and slick in his hands. He picks up a strand of indigo so dark it looks like the edge of a storm cloud. This will form the shadow beneath a rosebud, giving the design a three-dimensional depth that makes the silk appear to breathe. As he strikes the comb again, thud, 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 he feels the solidity of the work. The carpet is gaining weight, its physical presence becoming more undeniable with every passing hour. It is a slow birth, one that cannot be forced. In a world of fleeting moments and shifting sands, the weaver finds his sanctuary in the permanence of the knot. He is a man at peace with the pace of his life, content to spend his days in this sunlit room, turning the treasures of the earth, silk, water and plants into a vision of paradise that will endure long after the sun sets on the year 1602. The sun has climbed high enough that the golden pillars of light have begun to broaden. merging into a general brilliance that fills the upper half of the workshop. The weaver is now deeply immersed in the Islimi patterns, those intricate spiraling vines that represent the infinite nature of the divine. These lines must be perfectly smooth. Any jaggedness in the curve would betray a lack of focus. To achieve this, he uses a technique of staggered knots, meticulously shifting the colors by a single thread at a time to create a seamless gradient. His eyes are inches from the warp, his breath steady and shallow, synchronized with the rhythmic movement of his hands. The room has grown warmer, and the smell of the damp wool dyed and dried in the sun becomes more prominent, a heavy, comforting scent that speaks of the earth and the flock. A young apprentice enters the room quietly, carrying a fresh basket of silk skeins. He moves with a practiced silence, placing the basket near the weaver's feet. The boy watches for a moment, his eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion and awe. He is at the beginning of his journey, still learning the basic knots on a smaller, coarser loom in the back room. The master weaver acknowledges him with a slight nod but does not break his pace. This is the silent transmission of culture. The boy learns not by explanation, but by observation, by watching the way the master's wrist flicks, the way he judges the tension of the comb, and the way he respects the silence of the room. The apprentice departs, leaving behind the fresh silk, which glows in the basket like a collection of fallen rainbows. The weaver reaches for a strand of dupud silk, a double-weft technique that adds extra durability and a subtle ridge to the back of the carpet. As he works, the thud-clack of the comb takes on a more resonant, percussive quality. The metal teeth of the comb are worn into smooth grooves by years of such strikes, a physical record of the millions of knots that have passed through this workshop. This sound is a form of meditation for the weaver. It clears his mind of the trivialities of daily life, the price of grain, the repairs needed for his roof, the gossip of the square. All of it vanishes, replaced by the mathematical purity of the design. He is no longer just a man, he is a component of a grander machine, a vessel through which the artistic legacy of Isfahan flows. Outside, the midday heat begins to silence the smaller birds, but the distant murmur of the city's life continues unabated. You can hear the rhythmic call of a water carrier in the street, his brass cups clinking together in a bright metallic song. In the workshop, the weaver pauses to adjust the tension on the side beams. He turns the wooden winches with a grunt of effort, feeling the massive timber move just a fraction of an inch. This adjustment is crucial. As the carpet grows, the tension must be perfectly balanced to prevent the edges from curling. It is a moment of raw physical engineering in the middle of a delicate art form. Satisfied, he sits back down, his fingers immediately finding their place among the threads, as natural as a bird returning to its nest. The light begins to catch the dust motes in a way that makes them appear like tiny golden embers floating in the air. The weaver pulls a strand of silver-white silk, intended for the highlight on a lily petal. As he ties it, the thread catches a stray beam of sun and flares with a brilliant pearlescent light. For a brief second, the workshop feels transformed, no longer a place of stone and wood, but a celestial laboratory where light is being woven into matter. The weaver doesn't smile, but there is a softening in his gaze. He knows that this specific knot, placed just so, will be the thing that catches the eye of a viewer 100 years from now. He is weaving for a future he will never see, and in that selfless act he finds a profound, enduring peace. The workshop has reached its peak temperature for the morning, a dry and encompassing warmth that makes the wood of the loom expand and settle with the occasional soft groan. The weaver is now working on the transition between the central medallion and the open field of the carpet. This space is often referred to as the heavenly garden, a vast expanse of silk that must appear perfectly uniform in color yet rich in texture. He uses a deep midnight indigo for the background, a color so saturated that it seems to swallow the light, creating a sense of infinite depth. Against this dark void he will later weave tiny floating blossoms and scrolling clouds, but for now it is a test of his endurance and consistency. Every knot in this vast field must be tied with the exact same pressure, or the abrash, the natural variation in color, will appear as an unwanted streak rather than a beautiful ripple. The silence of the room is punctuated by the rhythmic, sharp snip of his curved knife. It is a clean, metallic sound that cuts through the heavy atmosphere like a bird's call. The weaver's focus is so intense that he no longer hears the city outside. The clatter of horse hooves and the distant cries of the bazaar have faded into a singular, low-frequency hum. His entire universe has shrunk to the width of the loom and the thickness of a single silk strand. He notices a slight irregularity in one of the warp threads, a tiny knot in the raw silk that could cause a bump in the final pile. With the patience of a saint, he stops, unpicks the last few knots, clears the obstruction, and begins again. There is no frustration in this act. To the Isfahan weaver of 1602, time is a plentiful resource, but perfection is rare and fragile. Near the window, the shadows of the arched masonry begin to creep across the floor, marking the slow arc of the sun toward the afternoon. The dust motes, once frantic in the morning light, now move with a heavy, languid grace. They settle on the skeins of silk, piles of crimson, emerald, and violet that look like heaps of crushed jewels in the corners of the room. The weaver reaches for a new color, a pale, dusty rose. This dye was made using the petals of the very flowers that grow in the workshop's courtyard, preserved in vinegar and salt. As he works the rose silk into the pattern, the room seems to fill with a visual fragrance. It is as if he is planting a garden that will never wither, one that requires no water, only the steady rain of his effort. The thud-clack of the comb is now a duller, more rhythmic pulse. The weaver's body has found a comfortable slouch, a posture of efficiency that allows him to work for hours without straining his back. He is a master of his own anatomy as much as his craft. Every few minutes he glances at the Wagira pattern board. It is a small rectangular piece of woven carpet itself, a miniature version of the grand design he is executing. It serves as his compass in this sea of silk. He follows the curves of the vines with his eyes, tracing the path his hands will take over the next several days. The complexity of the geometry is a prayer in itself, a mathematical proof of the beauty inherent in the world's design. As he completes the last row of the current section, he leans back, his bones popping softly in the quiet room. He takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of silk and history. He looks at his hands, stained, calloused, yet capable of creating something that will be whispered about in the halls of power. He is a humble man in a sunlit room, but in this moment he is also a creator of worlds. The carpet beneath his fingers is a bridge between the earth and the divine, and as he picks up the comb for one last strike before his midday break, the sound is a solid, satisfying thud that echoes with the weight of 1,000 years of tradition. The sun now stands at the very crest of the sky, and the workshop is flooded with a brilliant white heat that makes the turquoise tiles of the city outside shimmer like a mirage. Inside, the weaver prepares for the briefest of pauses. He knows that at this hour, the light is too direct, too harsh to judge the subtle variations in the silk's sheen. He takes this time to inspect the loom's tension one last time, ensuring the massive wooden beams haven't bowed under the midday warmth. His movements are slow and deliberate, mirroring the heavy stillness that has fallen over Isfahan. The thud-clack of the comb falls silent for a few moments, and in that gap the song of a solitary cicada in the courtyard becomes a piercing, rhythmic anthem of the desert summer. He sits back on his cushion, his eyes resting on the completed portion of the carpet. From this angle, the silk looks like a calm sea, the indigo depths reflecting the sky above. He can see the progress of the last few weeks, a slow, patient climb up the warp threads. It is a humbling sight. Human life is short, yet the things a human can create with enough time and silence can endure for centuries. This carpet will likely outlive the palace it is destined for, and it will certainly outlive the man whose fingers tied every single knot. This realization doesn't bring sadness, but a profound sense of peace. He is part of something eternal, a golden thread in the tapestry of human history. If you are enjoying this journey into the sunlit silence of a 17th century Persian workshop, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep the loom of history turning, bringing more stories of peace and craftsmanship to your screen. We would love to know what part of this weaver's world brings you the most tranquility. Share your thoughts in the comments below. The weaver reaches for his tea, the glass now cool to the touch. He watches a stray drop of condensation run down the side, tracing a path as precise as the vines on his loom. Even in his rest, his mind is attuned to the geometry of the world. He notices the way the shadows of the arched windows have pooled at his feet, forming dark, cool islands on the sun-baked stone. He knows that in an hour the light will begin its slow tilt, and the colors of the silk will once again reveal their secrets. He prepares his soul for the second half of the day, a time of deepening shadows and even deeper focus. As he stands to stretch, the floor feels solid and cool beneath him. He walks to the courtyard door and looks out at the fountain. The water is a constant, a silver thread that connects the mountains to the city. He splashes a little of the cool water on his face and hands, the scent of wet stone and rosewater revitalizing his senses. The world of 1602 is one of harsh sun and deep shadow, but here in the workshop, those extremes are woven into a harmonious middle ground. He returns to his bench, picks up the heavy metal comb, and with a single resonant thud, he signals his return to the task. The garden is waiting to grow, and he is the only one who can bring it to life. The midday sun begins its slow, imperceptible slide toward the west, and the workshop exhales a long, warm sigh. The air is still, but it carries a new density, a mixture of parched dust and the cooling moisture of the courtyard fountain. The weaver has returned to his seat, his body settling back into the familiar groove of the wooden bench. His hands, refreshed by the cool water, feel lighter, more responsive. He is beginning work on a delicate border of Eslimi scrolls, where the silk must curve in perfect arcs to frame the central garden. This requires a transition to a lighter shade of saffron, a color that seems to trap the very essence of the sun within its fibers. As he works, the thud-clack of the comb finds its rhythm again, but it sounds different now, more muted, as if the carpet itself is absorbing the sound. Each row of silk adds to the density of the fabric, turning the loom into a giant dampener that swallows the echoes of the room. The weaver enjoys this growing silence. It feels as though he is building a wall of silk between himself and the noise of the world. In this state of heightened focus, he can feel the subtle difference between two threads of the same color. He can sense the minute variations in the silk's twist. This is the level of mastery that 1602 Isfahan demands, a sensitivity that transcends sight and enters the realm of pure intuition. The light is changing again, turning from a harsh white to a soft, buttery yellow. This transition reveals the true brilliance of the abrash, those gentle wave-like variations in color that occur because the silk was dyed in small handcrafted batches. To a lesser artisan, these might be seen as flaws, but to the master they are the breath of the carpet. They give the surface a sense of movement, like the shifting light on a field of wheat, or the ripples on a mountain lake. The weaver purposefully selects a slightly darker skein of indigo to follow a lighter one, creating a subtle depth that makes the heavenly garden feel three-dimensional. He is painting with thread, using the natural imperfections of the earth to create a more perfect reality. Outside the arched window, the city is beginning to stir from its afternoon nap. You can hear the distant, melodic chime of a bell from a passing camel caravan, a sound that carries with it the dust of 1,000 miles, and the stories of the Great Silk Road. The weaver acknowledges the sound with a brief pause, his mind flashing to the long journey these silk threads took to reach his hands, from the mulberry groves of Gillan to the vats of the master dyers. He feels a responsibility to those who labored before him. To waste a single inch of this precious material through carelessness would be a betrayal of the entire chain of craft. He reties a knot that didn't feel quite right, his curved blade flashing as it trims the silk to the exact height of the surrounding pile. The workshop is now a symphony of small purposeful noises, the snip of the blade, the rustle of the silk skeins, and the rhythmic thud of the comb. These sounds are the only clock the weaver needs. He knows that when the shadow of the window frame reaches the base of the loom, it will be time to switch to the deeper reds of the evening motifs. For now, he remains in the golden light of the mid-afternoon, his fingers dancing across the warp with a speed that belies the months of work still ahead. He is a man who has found the secret to bending time, not by rushing through it, but by inhabiting every single second with the totality of his being. The afternoon light begins to ripen, turning the workshop into a cathedral of warm, liquid gold. The weaver is now working on the islimi ma pitch, the serpentine vines that twist and coil with the grace of desert snakes. This particular section requires a thread of pale turquoise, a color that in the shifting light of 1602 Isfahan looks like the very sky captured and spun into solid form. The weaver's hands are steady, his breathing so synchronized with the movement of his fingers that he has become a part of the loom's mechanical poetry. The thud-clack of the comb is no longer an external sound. It is a pulse he feels in his chest, a grounding frequency that keeps his spirit tethered to the stone floor while his imagination wanders through the silk garden. The atmosphere in the room has grown heavier with the scent of the materials. The damp silk, when struck by the comb, releases a faint, clean aroma that mingles with the dry, ancient smell of the cedar wood loom beams. The weaver notices a small dragonfly that has wandered in through the high arch. It hovers for a moment above the indigo section of the carpet, its iridescent wings shimmering in a way that perfectly mimics the changement effect of the silk pile. The weaver pauses, watching the creature. He realizes that his goal is to recreate this very brilliance, the fleeting, natural perfection of a wing or a petal, using only the patient repetition of his knots. The dragonfly zips away toward the fountain, leaving the weaver to translate that momentary flash of beauty into a permanence that will last 500 years. He reaches for a thread of madder red, so vibrant it seems to pulse with its own internal heat. This thread will form the center of a pomegranate flower, a symbol of fertility and abundance. As he ties the knot, he thinks about the dye master who spent weeks tending to the vats, checking the temperature and the acidity of the water to achieve this exact shade. There is a silent brotherhood between them, a shared understanding that anything worth making is worth the slow, agonizing attention to detail. The weaver feels the weight of this collective effort. He is the final guardian of the process, the one who takes the efforts of the shepherd, the spinner, and the dyer and binds them together into a singular, cohesive vision. The city outside is now fully awake. The sounds of the bazaar have intensified, the clinking of brass, the bartering of spice merchants, and the rhythmic shouts of the hamels carrying heavy loads through the narrow alleys. Yet, inside the workshop, these sounds are transformed into a soothing, distant white noise. They serve only to emphasize the profound stillness of the weaver's sanctuary. He is in the world, but not of it. He is in 1602, but he is also in the timeless space of the artist. He strikes the comb again, the sound sharp and definitive. Thud. The row is packed. Thud. The geometry is secured. Thud. Another layer of piece is added to the fabric. As he works, the weaver notices the way his own shadow has begun to climb the wall behind the loom. It is a reminder that the day is a finite resource, a vessel that is slowly being emptied, but there is no anxiety in this observation. In the philosophy of the Persian artisan, there is no such thing as a wasted hour if that hour was spent in the pursuit of the haq, the truth found in beauty. He picks up a strand of cream silk to add a highlight to a curling leaf, his blade flashing in the amber light. The carpet is a little longer now, a few more rows of paradise reclaimed from the void. The sun continues its journey, the dust motes continue their dance, and the weaver continues his knots, a silent architect of a silken world. The light of the late afternoon has begun to thicken, taking on the consistency of warm honey. It pours through the arched windows of the Isfahan workshop, turning the floating dust into a sea of gold. The weaver moves his fingers with a calm, rhythmic precision that seems almost hypnotic. He is now navigating the laver section, where the floral motifs become more densely packed, requiring constant switches between silk skeins. He reaches for a thread of deep forest green, then a touch of apricot, followed by the ever-constant indigo. The thud-clack of the comb is the only voice in the room, a steady, ancient conversation between the man and the machine. Each strike is firm, a physical punctuation mark at the end of a line of silken poetry. As the sun moves lower, the texture of the carpet reveals itself in new ways. The pile, the vertical silk fibers that create the surface, is so dense that it traps the light within its depth. When the weaver runs his hand over the finished section, the silk feels cool despite the warmth of the room. This is the quality of the highest grade of silk from the Caspian provinces. It carries a natural temperature that feels like mountain water. He notices how the colors begin to glow with a different intensity as the shadows lengthen. The reds, once bright and fiery, now look like smoldering embers, while the blues seem to recede into the distance, giving the flat surface an illusion of vast open space. There is a deep sense of companionship between the weaver and his loom. The wood, seasoned by decades of Isfahan's dry air, responds to his touch with subtle vibrations. He knows the exact sound of a warp thread that is beginning to lose its tension, a faint ping that most would miss but to him is as loud as a bell. He pauses to tighten the lower roller, the wooden gears clicking into place with a satisfying heavy sound. This is the maintenance of beauty. He understands that the invisible structure, the tension, the warp, the weft, is just as important as the visible silk. If the heart of the loom is not true, the garden on its surface will eventually wither. Outside, the sounds of the city are mellowing. The frantic energy of the midday trade has given way to the more leisurely pace of the evening. You can hear the rhythmic swish-swish of a merchant sweeping the stone steps of a nearby caravanserai, and the distant melodic whistling of a young boy leading a string of donkeys home. These sounds drift into the workshop, filtered by the thick walls, and become part of the weaver's meditative state. He is not lonely in his silence. He is connected to every soul in Isfahan through the shared rhythm of life. His work is his contribution to the city's harmony, a silent prayer for order and beauty in a world that is often chaotic. The scent of the workshop has shifted as the air cools. The rosewater in the basin has a sharper, more floral bite, and the smell of the charcoal fire from the tea-master's corner has settled into a comforting, smoky bass note. The weaver takes a final strand of gold silk for the hour, weaving it into the edge of a swirling vine. The thread catches a stray, horizontal beam of light and flares brilliantly, illuminating his focused face for a brief second. In that flash, you can see the lines of his experience, the squint of his eyes, the set of his jaw, the hands that have tied 1,000,000 knots. He is a man who has traded his time for something immortal. And as he strikes the comb once more, the sound is a solid, grounded thud that confirms the trade was worth it. The sun begins to dip behind the jagged peaks of the Zagros Mountains, and the sky over Isfahan transforms into a canvas of bruised purple and burnt orange. Inside the workshop, the golden hour has arrived, that fleeting moment when the light becomes horizontal and every texture is magnified 1,000-fold. The weaver is now working on the shah-par, the kingly wings of the floral palmettes. The silk he uses is a rare shade of ivory, undyed and pure, reflecting the evening light with a soft pearlescent sheen. His fingers move with a slow-motion grace, as if the thickening light has added weight to the air. The thud-clack of the comb is deeper now, echoing through the hollows of the high-vaulted ceiling, a rhythmic heartbeat that seems to slow down the passage of time itself. The atmosphere in the room is one of profound serenity. The long shadows of the loom stretch across the floor, reaching toward the arched entrance like dark fingers. The weaver's world has shrunk to a small circle of illuminated silk, where the intricate details of his labor are brought into sharp relief. He can see the tiny individual fibers of the indigo silk intertwined with the crimson, creating a depth of color that is almost intoxicating. He notices how a single knot of silver silk can change the entire mood of a flower, giving it a dew-kissed appearance that makes the fabric seem damp with life. This is the stage of the work where the carpet stops being a project and begins to take on a personality, a soul that responds to the changing light of the day. Outside the thick mud-brick walls, the city is settling into its evening ritual. The call to prayer rises from the Masjid-e-Shah, a soaring, melodic invitation that floats over the turquoise domes and into every courtyard. The weaver does not stop his work, but his movements take on a more prayerful quality. Each knot is tied with a silent intention, a hope for the future owner of this piece, a wish that they might find the same peace in walking upon it that he finds in creating it. The distant murmur of the city's fountains continues, a liquid counterpoint to the dry, rhythmic percussion of the loom. It is a moment of total harmony where the man, the city, and the craft are all vibrating at the same frequency of quiet devotion. The smell of the workshop has changed once more. The cooling air brings with it the scent of damp earth from the garden outside and the sweet, heavy perfume of night-blooming jasmine. These scents mingle with the familiar aroma of the dyed silk and the faint metallic tang of the weaver's tools. He reaches for a strand of deep violet silk, a color so rich it seems to vibrate against the dark indigo background. As he ties the knot, he feels the slight resistance of the thread, the tactile feedback of a material that is at once delicate and incredibly strong. He is a master of these contradictions, a man who uses force to create softness and complexity to create peace. As the last rays of the sun disappear, the workshop is plunged into a soft blue twilight. The weaver pauses, his hands resting for a moment on the smooth wood of the comb. He looks at the work he has accomplished today, a few more rows of a masterpiece, a few more inches of a dream made manifest. He is tired, but it is a good tiredness, the kind that comes from a day spent in total alignment with one's purpose. He knows that when he returns tomorrow, the sun will rise again over Isfahan, the light will fill this room, and he will pick up exactly where he left off, one knot at a time, until the garden is complete. The deep azure of the Persian twilight now fills the workshop, softening the edges of the heavy wooden beams and casting the skeins of silk into mysterious dark heaps. The weaver does not reach for a lamp immediately. He prefers this transition, the quiet blurring of the world where his hands must rely on the memory of the threads rather than the sharp clarity of sight. In this half-light, the carpet looks like a pool of dark water, its patterns shimmering faintly as if seen through a dream. The thud-clack of the comb has slowed to a rhythmic, meditative pace, each strike sounding like a heavy footfall in a silent hallway. This is the hour when the weaver feels closest to the spirits of the old masters, the men who sat at these same looms 100 years before Isfahan became the capital of the world. The cooling air brings a sudden clarity to the workshop's scent profile. The rose water, which had been a gentle background note throughout the heat of the day, now blooms with a cold floral intensity. It mingles with the scent of the weaver's own tea, the cardamom and cloves having steeped into a spicy, comforting vapor. He reaches for a final strand of silk for this row, a thread of pure, undyed white that will serve as a spark of light in the center of a dark vine. Even in the dimness, his fingers find the two warp threads with unerring precision. He ties the knot, the silk sliding smoothly against his skin, and trims it with a practiced, singular motion. He can feel the density of the carpet beneath him, a solid, heavy presence that represents his life's dedication. Outside, the first few stars are beginning to pierce the deep violet of the sky, visible through the high, arched windows. The city of Isfahan has quieted, the merchants have shuttered their stalls, and the camels have been led to their stables for the night. The only sounds remaining are the distant, rhythmic splashing of the city's many fountains and the occasional bark of a dog in a far-off alley. This silence is a cocoon for the weaver. It protects the fragile focus required for his craft. He knows that in the morning the world will return with its demands and its noise, but for now there is only the silence, the silk, and the slow, steady progression of his garden. He stands up slowly, his joints creaking in sympathy with the wooden loom. He stretches his arms wide, feeling the blood return to his fingers. He walks to the small window and looks out over the city. The turquoise domes of the mosques are now dark silhouettes against the starlit sky, looking like giant jewels resting on the earth. He feels a sense of immense gratitude for this life, for the light that guides his eyes, the silk that feeds his family, and the peace that inhabits this room. He is not a man of great wealth or power, but in his hands he holds the ability to create beauty that will endure for generations. This is his legacy, written in knots and dyed with the colors of the Persian soul. Turning back to the room, he prepares to cover his work for the night. The large linen cloth is unfolded with a soft, billowing sound, settling over the loom like a protective wing. It shields the silk from the dust of the night and the curious eyes of any who might pass by. The weaver gathers his tools, placing the heavy metal comb and the curved knife into their velvet-lined box. He pours the last of his tea, the liquid now dark and potent, and takes a slow sip as he gazes at the covered loom. The work is not done, but it is well begun. Tomorrow the sun will return, and the dance will begin again. For now, the workshop is a place of rest, a temple of industry waiting for the dawn. Night has fully descended upon Isfahan, turning the workshop into a sanctuary of absolute stillness. The weaver does not leave immediately. He sits for a moment on his smooth, worn wooden bench, allowing his hands to rest after the long day's labor. In the dim light of a single oil lamp, the partially finished carpet beneath its linen shroud looks like a living thing in deep slumber, carrying the rhythm of tens of thousands of knots within its fibers. He can feel the weight of it, not just the physical weight of the silk, but the weight of time, of patience, and of the dreams he has woven into every motif. The space is filled with the signature scent of a day's work concluded, the smell of cedar wood from the loom, the earthy tang of freshly dyed silk, and the faint fragrance of night-blooming jasmine drifting in from the courtyard. The rhythmic thud-clack of the comb is now only an echo in his mind, a steady heartbeat that defined his hours. The weaver smiles faintly, thinking of the peony blossoms and curving vines he completed today. They are more than just images, they are evidence of his existence, his way of communicating with the world and with those who will see this work long after he is gone. 1602 is a year of great changes, but within these four walls, peace is something tangible, woven from the finest silk threads. If these stories of ancient craftsmanship and historical silence bring you a sense of calm, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your support helps us continue to weave these peaceful narratives. We would love to hear from you in the comments. At what moment in your day do you feel the most at peace? Before extinguishing the lamp, the weaver approaches the loom one last time. He brushes his hand against the back of the carpet, where the rugged knots testify to his persistence. In Isfahan, it is said that every carpet is a garden that never withers, a piece of paradise brought down to earth. He knows he is but a humble craftsman, but through this work he has touched the eternal. As the flame flickers out, the workshop plunges into deep darkness, yet in that silence, the silk threads seem to whisper of the sun, the root dyes, and the hands that transformed them into art. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, and a new chapter of the silk garden will begin. Sleepy History with Wesley reimagines fictional historical tales, bringing peace, relaxation, and positive emotional values to our listeners. The night in Isfahan deepens and the moon rises like a silver coin over the city's blue-tiled domes. Inside the workshop, the absolute darkness is broken only by the thin, sharp beams of moonlight cutting through the high ventilation arches. The loom, now draped in its protective linen, stands like a silent sentinel in the center of the room. This is the hour of rest, yet for the carpet the work continues in a different form. In the cooling air, the silk fibers contract, tightening the bond between the knots and the warp. It is as if the garden is breathing, the silk threads settling into their permanent home, solidifying the intricate geometry that the weaver spent his day perfecting. The sounds of the workshop at night are subtle and rhythmic. There is the occasional creak of the heavy timber frame as it adjusts to the drop in temperature, a sound that mimics a soft sigh. From the courtyard, the fountain continues its liquid song, a constant murmur that seems to wash over the workshop walls. The air is thick with the scent of dried madder roots and the lingering ghost of the morning's tea. It is a space saturated with the essence of creation, where the physical effort of the day has been transformed into a spiritual presence. In 1602, while the rest of the world navigates the complexities of politics and trade, this small room remains a temple of singular, undisturbed focus. If you find yourself drifting into a state of calm while listening to these tales of the past, Please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support allows us to keep exploring the quiet, hidden moments of history together. What is it about the night that makes you feel most connected to the world around you? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. As the midnight hour passes, the workshop becomes a place of profound mystery. The patterns hidden beneath the cloth, the swirling vines, the hidden pomegranates, and the central medallion exist only in the mind of the sleeping weaver. Yet their power is felt in the room's heavy, peaceful atmosphere. The carpet has become a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a map of a paradise that exists beyond the reach of time. The weaver is home now, perhaps dreaming of the colors he will use tomorrow, his hands still twitching slightly in his sleep as if tying imaginary knots in the air. Sleepy History with Tales reimagines fictional historical tales, bringing peace, relaxation, and positive emotional values to our listeners. The pre-dawn chill begins to seep through the thick masonry of the workshop, bringing with it the faintest scent of the Zayande River and the damp earth of the surrounding orchards. The moonlight has faded, replaced by that deep ink-blue hour where the world feels suspended between existence and void. Inside the room, the loom is a dark, heavy mass, but the air is charged with the anticipation of a new day. The silk threads, tight and true, hold the tension of the design like the strings of a silent instrument, waiting for the weaver's touch to bring the melody of color back to life. As the first sliver of grey light touches the high windows, the details of the workshop slowly emerge from the gloom. The baskets of silk skeins, ruby, emerald, and gold, look like sleeping animals huddled in the corners. The metal comb and the curved knife resting on the wooden tray catch the dim light with a dull, cold glint. There is a sacredness to this moment of transition. In 1602 Isfahan, the start of work is not a burden but a ritual. The weaver will soon arrive, his footsteps echoing in the deserted street, bringing with him the warmth of life to this cold stone chamber. If the steady rhythm of this weaver's life brings you a sense of tranquility, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. We would love to hear from you. Does the early morning bring you a sense of hope or a moment of quiet reflection? Share your morning rituals with us in the comments below. The light begins to shift from grey to a soft, dusty lavender. The shadows of the arched ceiling retreat, and the textures of the room, the rough stone, the smooth silk, and the aged wood reclaim their boundaries. This is the moment when the heavenly garden on the loom feels most real, even through its linen shroud. It is a world born of shadow and light, destined to be walked upon by kings and cherished by generations. The first call of a distant bird breaks the silence, a sharp, clear note that signals the end of the night's watch. The garden is ready to grow once more, and the weaver is on his way to tend to his silken blossoms. The sun finally crests the horizon, sending a spear of brilliant orange light through the main archway, igniting the dust motes into a frantic golden dance. The heavy wooden door of the workshop groans on its iron hinges as the weaver enters, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. He moves with a quiet efficiency, his first act being the removal of the linen shroud. As the cloth slides away, the silk beneath seems to wake up, the indigo and saffron hues vibrating with sudden life as they catch the morning's fire. The garden has survived the night, and in the fresh light it looks even more vibrant than it did in the weaver's memory. He takes a moment to wash his hands in the stone basin, the water cold enough to sting his skin and sharpen his senses. Every morning this ritual serves as a boundary, leaving the cares of the world behind and entering the sacred space of the loom. He sits on his cushion, feeling the familiar support of the wooden bench, and picks up the heavy metal comb. He runs his fingers over the last row of knots he tied, checking for any slackness caused by the night's temperature drop. Satisfied, he reaches for a strand of pale rose silk, the color of the sky just before the sun broke through. If you enjoy starting your day with these glimpses into the patient beauty of the past, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us keep the stories of these silent masters alive. We are curious. What is the first thing you look forward to when you begin your day's work? Let us know in the comments. The thud clack of the comb returns to the room, a solid grounding sound that marks the official beginning of the day's journey. With each strike, the weaver feels the connection between his own heartbeat and the pulse of the city outside. The bazaar is waking up, the cries of the water sellers and the clatter of carts providing a distant, rhythmic soundtrack to his focused labor. He is no longer just a man in a room. He is a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of silk and history. The first knot of the day is tied, a tiny, perfect loop of rose-colored light, and the garden of 1602 begins to bloom once more under his steady hand. By mid-morning, the workshop has reached its perfect operating temperature. The sun has climbed high enough to cast a wide, steady glow over the weaver's workspace, illuminating the intricate map of the central medallion. He is now working on the darpish, the protective border that transitions the floral chaos of the inner field into the structured frame of the edge. This requires a thread of deep amber, a shade derived from the skin of wild pomegranates. As he ties each knot, the weaver feels the silk's texture change. It is becoming denser, more resilient, as the rows stack one upon another like the rings of an ancient tree. The atmosphere is one of profound, productive hum. The occasional snip of the scissors is sharp and final, followed by the deep, resonant thud of the comb packing the silk down into the sole of the carpet. The weaver notices how the light interacts with the silk's grain. From one direction, the colors are deep and saturated, but from another, they shimmer with a pale, ethereal light. This is the magic of the Persian knot, a single object that contains two different moods within the same thread. It reminds him that everything in life has two faces: the effort and the result, the shadow and the light, the silence and the song. If this immersion into the golden morning of a 17th century workshop brings you a sense of clarity, please hit the like button and subscribe. Your engagement helps us continue our journey through these peaceful corridors of history. We'd love to hear from you. Do you find that you do your best work in the quiet of the morning or the stillness of the night? Outside, the air is filled with the scent of baking nan-e-barbari from a nearby oven. The yeasty, toasted aroma drifting through the window and mingling with the scent of the weaver's tea. He takes a brief pause, not to rest his body but to rest his eyes, staring at the courtyard fountain to reset his vision. The constant movement of the water helps his brain process the thousands of tiny details he has just rendered in silk. When he turns back to the loom, his focus is renewed. He picks up a strand of emerald green, ready to weave a single leaf that will hide amongst the larger blossoms, a secret detail known only to him and the soul of the carpet. The sun has reached its peak, hanging directly over the center of the workshop and casting short, sharp shadows that emphasize every tiny bump and ridge of the silk pile. The weaver is now focused on a gold-e-henna motif, a stylized henna flower that requires a delicate gradient of terracotta and pale peach. His movements have become purely instinctive. He no longer looks at the pattern drawing pinned to the loom. The design has migrated from the paper into his blood, flowing through his fingertips and into the warp. Each knot is a commitment, a tiny anchor holding a piece of 1602 Isfahan in place for all of eternity. The heat of the midday is beginning to rise, bringing out the rich, animal scent of the wool foundation and the sweet, clean smell of the silk. A large honeybee, heavy with pollen from the palace gardens, wanders into the workshop, attracted by the vibrant floral patterns on the loom. It hovers for a moment over a silken rose, confused by the perfection of the mimicry, but before buzzing back out into the bright courtyard. The weaver watches it with a quiet pride. To fool nature itself, even for a second, is the highest compliment a craftsman can receive. He returns to his work, the thud-clack of the comb sounding more rhythmic and resonant in the heavy, warm air. If you find a sense of stillness in the focused movements of this ancient craft, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your support allows us to keep exploring these moments of timeless beauty. Tell us in the comments, is there a craft or a hobby in your life that makes you lose all track of time? A young apprentice enters the room quietly, carrying a tray with a small glass of hot tea and a plate of dates. He places it on a low stone stool near the weaver's side, careful not to disturb the profound concentration of the master. The weaver acknowledges him with a slight nod of the head but does not stop his hands. The tea steams in the light, the scent of cardamom rising to meet the weaver's nose, providing a momentary sensory bridge between his labor and the world outside. He knows that soon he will have to stop for the midday prayer and a meal, but for now he wants to finish this single, perfect flower. He ties the final knot of the petal, trims the silk with a flourish of his blade, and for a brief second the workshop is filled with the silence of a job perfectly done. As the midday heat settles into the thick stone walls, the weaver finally allows his hands to fall still. He reaches for the small glass of tea, the liquid dark and shimmering like the mahogany dyes in his baskets. The tea is hot, sweetened with a jagged piece of rock sugar that crunches between his teeth, releasing a burst of energy that clears the fog of repetitive labor. He looks at his work not as a creator but as an observer. From this close distance, he can see the individual slubs in the silk, tiny, natural imperfections that give the carpet its character and soul. He knows that a machine-like perfection is not the goal. The goal is a harmony that reflects the beautiful flaws of life itself. The workshop has grown quiet as the city outside retreats into the shade for the afternoon siesta. The only sound is the rhythmic drip of the fountain in the courtyard and the occasional rustle of the weaver's robes as he adjusts his position. He leans back, stretching his spine against the cool masonry, feeling the tension of the morning's work evaporate. His eyes wander to the ceiling, where the intricate geometric brickwork mirrors the logic of his carpet. He realizes that he is part of a grander design, a city built on the principles of math, art, and faith, where every brick and every knot has a designated purpose in the grander architecture of the world. If you find a sense of peace in these moments of quiet reflection and historical detail, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support is what allows these stories to unfold, row by row. We would love to hear from you in the comments. Do you find that a short break in the middle of your day helps you return to your tasks with a clearer mind? He sets the empty tea glass down and picks up the metal comb once more. Before he begins the next row, he runs his thumb over the shesh dar, the six-sided geometry of a small star motif. It is firm, tight, and perfectly aligned. He feels a surge of quiet satisfaction. The afternoon ahead will be long, and the light will eventually begin its slow retreat. But for now, the weaver is exactly where he is meant to be. He reaches for a skein of sky-blue silk, prepares his first knot of the afternoon and the workshop. The afternoon light begins its slow amber shift, stretching the shadows of the loom across the workshop floor. The weaver is now working on the vase, the delicate floral vines that connect the larger motifs. These lines are the veins of the carpet carrying the viewer's eye from one blossom to the next. They require a steady hand and a thread of pure, shimmering silver silk. As he works, the weaver notices how the cooling air has sharpened the colors once more. The deep reds of the madder-dyed wool beneath the silk seem to throb with a quiet intensity, providing a grounded base for the ethereal silk garden growing above it. There is a specific kind of music in the workshop at this hour. It is the sound of the silk sliding through the warp, a faint rhythmic hiss that precedes the heavy thud of the comb. It is a language of friction and resolution. The weaver's mind wanders to the journey of the silk itself, from the white mulberry trees of the Caspian shore to the boiling dye vats of the Isfahan bazaar, and finally to his own calloused fingers. Every knot is the end of one journey and the beginning of another. He is not just making a floor covering, he is creating a legacy that will likely outlive the very building in which it is being created. If the steady, unhurried pace of this 17th century life helps you find your own rhythm of relaxation, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your presence here is a vital part of our storytelling community. We invite you to share in the comments, what is one thing in your life that you believe will stand the test of time? A soft breeze drifts through the high arches, carrying the scent of parched dust and the cooling stone of the city's many bridges. The weaver pauses to adjust his lamp. Even though the sun has not yet set, he knows the shadows will fall quickly in this corner of the city. He looks at the medallion at the heart of his work. Now almost half revealed, it looks like a sun caught in a web of flowers, a symbol of the divine order at the center of all things. He picks up a strand of indigo silk, so dark it is almost black, to define the final edge of a leaf. The garden is nearly halfway to the sky, and with every knot the weaver feels himself becoming more a part of the silk than of the world outside. The sun begins to decline, and the golden hour of Isfahan arrives, turning the workshop into a cathedral of horizontal light. This is the time when the shimmer of the carpet is most pronounced. The silk threads, tied at a slight angle, catch the low rays and reflect them with a metallic brilliance, making the garden appear as if it is illuminated from within. The weaver works now on the shokofe, the tiny budding blossoms that fill the negative space between the larger leaves. He uses a thread of pale lemon yellow, a color so bright it seems to vibrate against the deep indigo background. Each knot is a spark of light, a promise of a spring that never ends. The city outside is beginning its transition into the evening. The sounds of the bazaar have softened into a distant, melodic hum, and the air is filled with the lowing of livestock being led back to their pens. Inside, the weaver's movements have slowed to a rhythmic, prayerful pace. He feels the fatigue in his shoulders, a dull ache that is a badge of a day well spent, but as he looks at the row of buds he has just completed, the tiredness is replaced by a sense of awe. The carpet is no longer a collection of threads, it is becoming a landscape, a place where one could imagine walking through the cool shade of silken trees. If the transformation of raw silk into a radiant garden brings you a sense of wonder, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us continue to explore these quiet triumphs of human skill. We would love to hear from you. Is there a particular color or pattern that always makes you feel a sense of peace? The light turns a deep, bruised purple as it leaves the lower walls and climbs toward the vaulted ceiling. The weaver prepares his final few knots for the day. He chooses a strand of ivory silk to add a highlight to a curling vine, a touch that will only be visible when the light hits the carpet at just the right angle. It is a secret detail, a gift for the future owner who takes the time to look closely. He trims the ends of the silk with a soft snip, the sound echoing in the now shadowy room. The work for today is drawing to a close, but the garden of 1602 remains, growing silently in the twilight, waiting for the return of the sun. The final rays of the sun have retreated from the floor, leaving the workshop in a soft, dusty blue twilight. The weaver finally sets down his heavy metal comb, the clatter of the tool against the wooden tray signaling the end of the day's labor. His fingers are stained with the faint traces of indigo and madder, a temporary map of the colors he has handled since dawn. He stands up slowly, feeling the stretch in his hamstrings and the release of tension in his neck. He walks to the center of the room and looks at the loom from a distance. In this dim light, the silk doesn't just sit on the warp, it seems to float, a glowing tapestry of shadows and soft highlights that holds the silence of the room within its pile. He moves to the corner to fetch the large linen cover, its fabric cool and heavy in his hands. Covering the carpet is an act of respect, a way of tucking the garden in for the night. As he drapes the cloth over the loom, the vibrant colors disappear, replaced by the humble, unbleached texture of the shroud. The workshop feels different now, less like a place of intense creation and more like a place of rest. He pours the last drop of water from his jug onto a small potted mint plant near the window, the scent of the crushed leaves rising to meet the cool evening air. The transition is complete. The craftsman is becoming a man of the hearth once more. If the quiet closing of a day's work in ancient Persia brings you a sense of closure and calm, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your engagement helps us keep these historical whispers alive. Tell us in the comments, what is the small ritual you perform to signal the end of your workday? Before he blows out the small oil lamp, the weaver takes one last look around his sanctuary. The baskets of silk, the bundles of wool, and the sturdy wooden beams of the loom all seem to watch him with a silent wooden dignity. He feels a deep, quiet gratitude for the consistency of his craft. In a world of fleeting moments, the knots he tied today are permanent. He steps out into the cool Isfahan night, the air smelling of wood smoke and the distant river, and turns the heavy iron key in the lock. Behind him, in the absolute darkness of the workshop, the silk garden of 1602 waits in perfect stillness, dreaming of the light that will return tomorrow. The streets of Isfahan are now bathed in the silver glow of the moon, and the city's daytime roar has settled into a rhythmic, nocturnal pulse. The weaver walks home, his footsteps echoing against the mud-brick walls, yet a part of his mind remains back in the workshop. He thinks of the torange, the central medallion he will begin to refine tomorrow. It is the heart of the carpet, the point from which all geometry flows and to which all eyes are eventually drawn. In his mind, he visualizes the perfect balance of turquoise and gold, a celestial sun that will anchor the swirling floral vines. Even in his walk, his pace is steady and measured, mirroring the patient cadence of his work at the loom. The night air is crisp, carrying the scent of roasting meat and spices from the kitchens of nearby homes. He passes a small tea house where the low murmur of conversation and the bubbling of water pipes create a soothing backdrop. In 1602, the city is a crossroads of the world, a place where silk travels east and west, yet the weaver finds his greatest satisfaction in the stillness of his own creations. He looks up at the stars, noting their fixed positions. They are the ultimate map, just as the knots in his carpet form a map of his own spiritual journey. For him, there is no separation between the order of the cosmos and the order of the silk. If you find a sense of peace in the quiet reflection of a master craftsman at the end of his day, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us continue to share these journeys through time and tranquility. We'd love to hear from you. Where do you find your inspiration when you're away from your daily tasks? He reaches his own door and pauses for a moment, looking back toward the direction of the workshop. He knows that under the linen shroud, the silk is resting, its fibers drinking in the cool humidity of the night. It is a living, breathing entity that grows stronger with every passing hour of darkness. As he enters his home, the warmth of his family and the soft light of the hearth greet him. The day's labor is done, but the masterpiece is never truly silent. It remains a presence in his soul, a garden of silk that blooms even in the depths of his sleep, waiting for the first light of dawn to call it back into the world of color. Deep in the heart of the night, the weaver's home is silent, but his dreams are colored by the vibrant dyes of his trade. He sees the gol-e-bulbul, the flower, and the nightingale intertwining in a dance of silk that defies the gravity of the loom. In the darkness of the workshop, blocks away, the carpet is a silent masterpiece in waiting. The heavy cedar beams of the loom, seasoned by decades of tension, settle with a faint, musical creak. This is the stage of resting the warp, where the vertical threads adjust to the thousands of new interruptions tied into them during the day. The carpet is not just a surface, it is becoming a dense, three-dimensional forest of silk. The night watchman passes by the workshop, his lantern casting a fleeting amber glow through the high vents. For a brief second, the light brushes against the edge of the linen shroud, but the garden beneath remains hidden, a secret shared only between the craftsman and the moonlight. In 1602 Isfahan, such workshops are the quiet engines of an empire's soul. While the great bazaar sleeps, the art created within these walls remains, vibrating with the energy of human intent. The air inside is still, holding the temperature of the stone floor, preserving the delicate moisture levels necessary to keep the silk supple and strong. If you enjoy these deep dives into the quiet, midnight heart of history, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your support allows us to keep exploring the beauty of the slow and the steady. We invite you to share in the comments. Do you feel that things made by hand carry a different energy than those made by machines? As the hours tilt toward the fourth watch, the silence in the workshop becomes even more profound. It is a productive silence, the kind that exists in a field just before the harvest. The weaver's tools, the heavy shears, the iron comb, and the sharp, curved knives rest in their velvet-lined box, their edges holding the memory of 1,000 precise cuts. The patterns of the Isfahan style, with its infinite spirals and mathematical grace, are etched into the very atmosphere of the room. The garden is waiting, the silk is ready, and soon the first hint of grey on the horizon will signal the return of the man who speaks to the threads. The transition from deep night to the first tentative breath of dawn in 1602 Isfahan is a symphony of subtle shifts. Inside the workshop, the air is cold and heavy, a dense silence that feels almost liquid. As the sky outside begins to turn from the black of ink to a bruised, smoky indigo, the architectural details of the loom emerge once more from the gloom like a ship appearing through a thick fog. The weaver arrives earlier than usual today, his mind already occupied by the Shah Abbasi floral motifs he must execute. He moves through the courtyard with the quiet grace of a man who has walked these stones for 40 years, his hand finding the heavy iron key by touch alone. The lock turns with a satisfying metallic clack that echoes through the empty street, a sound that officially wakes the spirit of the workshop. Inside, the weaver does not rush to the silk. He begins by lighting a small charcoal brazier, the smell of the burning fruitwood providing a warm, grounding counterpoint to the sharp chill of the stone walls. As the embers glow orange, he prepares his morning tea, the water bubbling in a small brass samovar. He watches the steam rise and vanish into the high, vaulted shadows of the ceiling. This moment of quiet contemplation is essential. He is aligning his internal rhythm with the tension of the loom. He knows that if his heart is hurried, his knots will be uneven. He looks at the linen shroud covering his work, feeling a surge of anticipation. Today is a significant day. He will begin the transition into the upper quadrant of the central medallion, a task that requires absolute clarity of mind and a steady, unwavering hand. If you find that this expanded journey into the meticulous world of a master weaver brings you a deeper sense of relaxation and focus, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the thread that allows us to weave these long, peaceful narratives together. We would love to know, when you have a difficult task ahead of you, what ritual do you use to find your center and prepare your mind? Let us discuss your morning routines in the comments below. He finally approaches the loom and pulls back the linen shroud with a slow, deliberate movement. The silk beneath is cold to the touch, but it shimmers even in the dim, pre-dawn light, its ruby and turquoise depths holding the ghosts of yesterday's sun. He runs his hand over the surface, feeling the pile, the thousands of individual silk ends trimmed to a perfect velvet-like height. It is firm and resilient, a testament to the thousands of pounds of pressure exerted by the warp threads. He sits on his bench, the wood smooth and warm from years of his own presence, and picks up a skein of gold-wrapped silk. This thread is rare and expensive, reserved only for the highlights of the royal patterns. As he ties the first knot of the day, a tiny spark of gold against a field of deep indigo, he feels the connection between his own small life and the grand history of his city. The thud clack of the heavy iron comb begins, louder and more resonant in the morning stillness, a heartbeat of silk and stone that will continue until the sun sets once more over the domes of Isfahan. The morning sun has now fully conquered the workshop, pouring in through the high arched windows in thick tactile shafts of light that illuminate the swirling dust motes like tiny dancing stars. The weaver is now deep into the aslimi patterns, the complex spiraling vines that represent the infinite nature of the divine. This section of the carpet is particularly demanding. The vines must flow with a natural, organic grace, yet they are governed by a strict mathematical logic that ensures perfect symmetry across the entire 6-meter span. He works with a strand of dupud silk, a double-twisted thread that provides extra strength and a deeper luster. Every time he pulls the silk through the warp, there is a faint, rhythmic zip sound, followed by the decisive grounding thud of the heavy metal comb. His hands move in a blur of practiced motion, a choreography of fingers that has been refined over decades until it is as natural as breathing. The environment of the workshop has transformed as the day warms. The scent of the charcoal fire has faded, replaced by the rich, complex aroma of the silk itself, a smell that is slightly sweet, slightly earthy and redolent of the natural dyes used to treat it. He pauses to sharpen his curved blade on a small whetstone, the scratch of the metal providing a brief, sharp counterpoint to the softer sounds of the loom. He looks at the vase, the floral vase, he is currently constructing. It is a masterpiece of shading, using 17 different shades of red and pink to create the illusion of three-dimensional depth. He knows that from a distance these individual knots will disappear, merging into a single glowing image that looks more like a painting than a textile. In 1602, during the reign of Shah Abbas the Great, such carpets were not merely floor coverings, they were diplomatic gifts, royal treasures, and symbols of a golden age of Persian art. The weaver feels this responsibility in his marrow. He is not just making a carpet, she is constructing a piece of his nation's soul, knot by agonizing knot. If the expansive and detailed rhythm of this ancient craftsmanship helps you find a profound sense of stillness in your busy world, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your engagement is the foundation that allows us to continue building these long-form, immersive historical experiences. We are deeply curious to hear your perspective. Do you find that engaging in a slow, repetitive task helps your mind wander to creative places? Or does it help you stay grounded in the present moment? Please share your experiences with us in the comments section below. We read every one. By the time the shadows begin to shift toward the north, the weaver has completed a full 3 inches of the new row. To the untrained eye, it might seem like a small gain, but to the master it represents nearly 10,000 individual decisions and physical actions. He leans back, his spine cracking slightly, and takes a long draught of cool water from a clay carafe. The water tastes of the earth and the mountain snows from which it flowed. He looks at the section he just finished. The way the gold thread catches the light and seems to move as he shifts his head. It is perfect. There is a specific kind of joy in this, a quiet, solitary pride that doesn't need an audience to be valid. He picks up a new skein. This one a deep, haunting turquoise that reminds him of the tiles on the Masjid-e Shah. This color will form the background for the next series of palmettes. As he settles back into the rhythm, the thud-clack of the comb becomes a steady, hypnotic pulse, a sonic anchor that keeps him centered in the vast, flowing river of time. The garden continues to grow, oblivious to the world outside, thriving in the dedicated silence of the weaver's hands. The midday sun reaches its zenith, casting a fierce vertical brilliance that penetrates even the deepest corners of the stone workshop. The air has grown still and heavy, vibrating with a warmth that seems to bake the scents of the room, the cedar wood of the loom, the iron of the tools, and the organic tang of the vegetable-dyed silk, into a single intoxicating perfume. The weaver is now engaged in the bande rumi patterns, a series of interlocking arabesque loops that require absolute precision. Because these lines are so thin, often only 2 knots wide, any slight deviation in tension would cause the entire vine to appear jagged rather than fluid. He uses a specialized needle hook for this stage, his fingers dancing behind the warp threads to pull the silk through with a speed that defies the eye. Each movement is a testament to the concept of mushakat, the beautiful struggle of the artist to bring order out of chaos. In the silence of the afternoon, the only sound is the rhythmic hiss-snap of the silk and the distant, muffled calls of the spice merchants in the great bazaar, their voices softened by the thick masonry walls of the workshop. As he works, the weaver reflects on the mathematics of his creation. The carpet is a mirror of the universe. The central medallion represents the sun or the divine source, while the surrounding garden reflects the multiplicity of life on earth. To weave this, he must be both a mathematician and a poet. He calculates the raj, the density of knots per unit of length, constantly ensuring that the proportions of the floral elements remain consistent as the carpet grows. If the tension is too high, the silk will snap. If it is too low, the pattern will sag. It is a delicate, lifelong dance on the edge of perfection. He pauses to wipe a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, careful not to let even a drop of moisture touch the precious silk. He looks at his fingers, which have become permanently calloused and slightly stained by the indigo and cochineal dyes. These hands are his greatest tools, more sensitive than any instrument, capable of detecting a single thread that is thinner than its neighbors. In 1602, in the heart of the Safavid Empire, his skill is his identity, a quiet power that transforms raw nature into an everlasting paradise that will eventually grace the marble floors of a palace or the hallowed halls of a great mosque. If you find yourself becoming lost in the intricate details of this silken world, and if the slow unfolding of this historical tapestry brings you a sense of deep, meditative peace, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support acts as the warp and weft of our storytelling, allowing us to expand these narratives into even more immersive and tranquil spaces. We invite you to reflect with us in the comments. When you look at a piece of art, do you find yourself more drawn to the grand overall design, or do you prefer to get lost in the tiny hidden details that only reveal themselves upon close inspection? We look forward to reading your thoughts and inspirations. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, the light in the workshop softens, shifting from a bright white to a rich honeyed amber. This change in light reveals new depths in the silk. The pashme, the soft wool foundation, provides a matte contrast to the shimmering silk gol flowers, creating a sense of movement as if the garden were swaying in a gentle breeze. The weaver reaches for a skein of emerald green silk, dyed using the fermented leaves of the indigo plant and the yellow flowers of the weld. This green is vibrant and deep, the color of a hidden oasis in the middle of the Persian desert. He begins to weave a series of cypress motifs, symbols of life and eternity. Each knot is tied with a prayer-like focus, a silent dedication to the craft. The thud clack of the comb sounds more melodic now, echoing off the high-vaulted ceiling like a rhythmic chant. The weaver knows that he is reaching a milestone in the carpet's life. By the time the moon rises tonight, the lower half of the great medallion will be complete. It is a slow, arduous journey, but in the heart of 1602 Isfahan, time is not a master to be feared, but a companion to be honored through the patient creation of beauty. The late afternoon light begins to stretch across the workshop floor, turning the dust into a golden haze that clings to the heavy timber of the loom. The weaver has reached a critical juncture, the gere sazi, or the complex interlocking of the secondary border with the main field of the carpet. This area requires an incredibly high knot density, nearly 900 knots per square decimeter, to capture the infinitesimal details of the shukofeh buds that seem to burst from the silken vines. At this density, the work moves with agonizing slowness. Every hour of intense labor yields only a few centimeters of progress, but the result is a texture so fine it feels like the skin of a ripened peach. The weaver's eyes, though weary, remain sharp. He is looking for the soul of the thread, ensuring that each strand of silk lies in the same direction so that the light will reflect off the finished surface with a uniform liquid brilliance. In 1602, there is no rush to finish, for a masterpiece is measured in centuries, not days. The weaver understands that he is currently a tenant of time, borrowing these hours to create something that will eventually stand independent of his own existence. The silence of the workshop is now layered with the sounds of a city preparing for the evening. From the street beyond the thick walls, he hears the rhythmic clink-clink of the coppersmiths finishing their day's work, and the distant melodic chanting of a street poet reciting verses of Hafez near the river. These sounds do not distract him. Rather, they provide a rhythmic pulse that he incorporates into his weaving. He reaches for a specialized shade of silk known as khaki, a muted earthy tone created from the shells of walnuts, which he uses to shadow the undersides of the leaves. This subtle shading is what breathes life into the garden, giving the flat textile a sense of weight and dimension. He works with two different types of knots, the symmetrical Turkish knot for the structural borders and the asymmetrical Persian knot for the fluid, floral interior. This technical duality allows him to achieve both immense durability and artistic freedom. His fingers move with a memory that is older than his own body, a lineage of movement passed down through generations of master craftsmen in the dusty heart of Persia. As the sun dips lower, casting a deep, fiery crimson across the upper reaches of the workshop, the weaver begins to work on a lashak, the corner medallion that will mirror the central design. This requires a perfect mathematical inversion of the patterns he has already completed, a feat of mental geometry that he performs without the aid of a single written note. He trusts his intuition, which has been sharpened by millions of previous knots. The atmosphere in the room is one of heavy golden tranquility. The heat of the day is slowly radiating out of the stones, replaced by a cooling breeze that carries the scent of the Midan-i-Shah, the great royal square, with its aromas of horses, leather, and jasmine. He ties a final sequence of knots in a shimmering shade of pomegranate red, his curved knife flashing in the twilight as he trims the silk with a soft final whisk. He takes a deep breath, his lungs filling with the cool evening air, and looks at the day's work. The garden has expanded, it has grown deeper, richer and more complex. As he prepares to wind down, the thud-clack of the comb slows to a gentle, steady beat, a lullaby for the silk as the city of Isfahan prepares to surrender to the stars. If the deep, unhurried immersion into this 17th century craft brings a sense of profound stillness to your mind, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your presence here allows us to continue weaving these long-form historical tapestries, preserving the quiet beauty of the past for the modern world. We are curious to hear from you in the comments. In your own life, is there a skill or a piece of knowledge that was passed down to you by an elder? How does it feel to carry that legacy forward in a world that is always rushing toward the new? Your stories of tradition and continuity are the threads that connect us all. As the indigo shadows of twilight finally reclaim the workshop, the weaver enters the phase of his labor known as the twilight assessment. This is the time when the natural light dies away and the silk begins to behave in a different manner, losing its midday sparkle and taking on a deep, brooding luminescence. He lights a second oil lamp, placing it on a low stone ledge so the flame sits exactly at the level of the carpet's current row. The flickering light casts long, dramatic shadows across the silk pile, revealing any microscopic unevenness in the height of the knots. To the weaver, this is the most honest hour of the day. The sun can be a flatterer, hiding flaws in its brilliance, but the low dancing flame of the lamp tells no lies. He spends nearly an hour meticulously grooming the surface with a fine-toothed brass brush, ensuring the sleep of the silk, the direction in which the fibers naturally lay, is perfectly uniform across the entire width. This process is hypnotic, a soft shh sound that fills the room, replacing the aggressive thud-clack of the comb. It is a moment of grooming the garden, tending to the silken petals as if they were living things. In the year 1602, the city of Isfahan does not go to sleep, it merely changes its voice. Outside the thick cedar doors, the night air is filled with the scent of wood smoke and the distant, rhythmic drumming of a Sufi gathering in a nearby khanqah. The weaver, however, remains insulated in his stone sanctuary. He is currently working on the Isfahan spiral, a motif where a single vine must curve with perfect mathematical curvature across a distance of 4,000 knots. To achieve this, he uses a technique called offset knotting, shifting the position of the knots by half a warp thread to create a curve that appears smooth even under close inspection. This level of detail is exhausting for the mind. It requires a state of fana or total absorption, where the weaver loses the sense of his own identity and becomes merely an extension of the loom. His fingers, though swollen and stiff from 12 hours of labor, move with a startling delicacy, picking up strands of saffron-dyed silk that are so fine they are nearly invisible in the dim lamplight. He is weaving the light of the stars into the fabric of the earth, creating a bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial that will remain long after he has returned to the dust. The atmosphere in the workshop has reached a peak of meditative density. The cooling stone walls seem to breathe, exhaling the heat of the day in a slow, rhythmic sigh that mimics the weaver's own breath. He begins the final row of the evening, a task he performs with a sense of sacred duty. Each knot in this row is a seal on the day's progress, a commitment that cannot be undone. He chooses a thread of pure undyed white silk to form the highlight on a tiny jasmine blossom nestled in the corner of a larger palmette. This white silk, sourced from the finest cocoons of the Gilan province, has a natural pearlescent quality that glows with an ethereal light. As he ties the knot and trims the excess, he feels a profound sense of closure. The day has been a journey through 1,000 miniature landscapes, and he has successfully navigated every curve and thorn. He stands up, his joints popping in the silence, and stretches his arms toward the vaulted ceiling, feeling the immense weight of the day's silence finally lifting from his shoulders. He is a man who has traded his hours for beauty, and in the quiet of the 17th century night, he knows the trade was more than fair. If the expanded, detailed rhythm of this master weaver's life provides you with a sanctuary of calm in a loud and fast-paced world, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your support is the foundation upon which we build these immersive historical journeys, allowing us to delve deeper into the forgotten textures of the past. We would love to hear from you in the comments. Is there a specific sound like the crackle of a fire, the ticking of a clock, or the rhythm of a tool that helps you enter a state of deep focus or relaxation? Share your sensory anchors with our community, and let us explore the power of rhythmic silence together. The deep stillness of the midnight hour now blankets the city of Isfahan, and inside the workshop the weaver moves with a slow, deliberate reverence as he prepares to conclude his day. The flickering oil lamp casts a final warm glow over the loom, illuminating the Magi Gaia, the delicate floral borders that represent the cycle of life and rebirth. In this quietude, the weaver engages in the vital task of tarikashi, the inspection of the warp tension. He walks to the back of the loom, running his calloused palm across the thousands of vertical cotton threads. They must ring with a specific, low-pitched note when plucked, a sign that the tension is perfectly balanced. If one side is tighter than the other, the carpet will eventually develop a wave that no amount of washing can ever truly remove. This technical mastery is the invisible skeleton of the art. Without it, the beauty of the silk is merely a fleeting facade. He adjusts the heavy wooden wedges at the base of the loom with a few rhythmic strikes of a stone mallet, the sound thump, thump, thump echoing through the dark workshop like a slow, steady pulse that tethers the masterpiece to the earth. As he prepares to depart, the weaver performs a ritual that has remained unchanged since his apprenticeship 40 years ago. He gathers the leftover scraps of silk, tiny vibrant clippings of crimson, azure and gold, and carefully sorts them into small wicker baskets. In the economy of 1602, nothing is wasted. These remnants will be used to dye smaller batches of thread or given to the local children to weave into humble household charms. He looks at his hands where the indigo dye has seeped deep into the creases of his skin, a permanent testament to his devotion. He feels a strange spiritual connection to the kermes, the tiny insects from which the brilliant red dye is harvested. It reminds him that the most magnificent colors of the world often come from the smallest, most overlooked lives. This humility is the core of the Persian craftsman's philosophy. One must be small in the face of the work, so that the work can become great. He takes a final sip of cold tea, now bitter and dark, and feels the caffeine sharpen his senses one last time before the long walk home through the moonlit alleys of the city. The workshop itself seems to settle into the night, the cooling bricks shrinking with infinitesimal creaks that sound like the building is whispering to the loom. The weaver reaches for the heavy linen dust cover once more, but before he pulls it over, he pauses to look at the shikaste patterns, the intentional tiny breaks in the symmetry that he weaves into the design. In his tradition, only God is perfect, and to create a perfectly symmetrical carpet would be an act of spiritual arrogance. These subtle errors are the signature of his humanity, the breath of life in an otherwise rigid geometry. He finally drapes the cloth over the loom, the sound of the fabric sliding over the silk, a soft, hushed shh that signals the official end of the labor. The garden of 1602 is now tucked away, hidden from the world, its colors dreaming in the dark. He blows out the oil lamp, and for a moment the smell of the extinguished wick, sharp and acrid, dominates the room before the scent of old wood and cold stone returns. He steps out into the night, the silver moon hanging over the turquoise domes of the city, and feels the immense, silent weight of the history he is building with every single knot. If the deep, expansive narrative of this ancient weaver's life helps you find a sense of timelessness and peace, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your engagement is the thread that connects our stories across the centuries, helping us to preserve the slow and steady rhythms of human craftsmanship. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. In our modern, fast-paced world, what is one thing you do that allows you to slow down and appreciate the imperfect beauty of life? Do you have a ritual that helps you sign off from the demands of the day and find your own inner stillness? We look forward to reading your reflections and finding common ground in our shared search for tranquility. The pre-dawn air of the following morning is a sharp, biting cold that clings to the turquoise-tiled domes of Isfahan, yet the weaver is already awake, his body governed by a clock older than the city's sundials. As he approaches the workshop, the street is filled with the low rhythmic thwap-thwap of a baker slapping dough against the side of a clay oven, the scent of fresh nanny barberry mingling with the wood smoke and the crisp metallic ozone of the morning dew. He enters his sanctuary and does not immediately light the lamp. Instead, he sits in the silver-grey gloom, letting his eyes adjust. This is the hour of niyaz, a moment of quiet supplication before the work begins. He listens to the silence of the loom. In the stillness, he can almost hear the tension held within the silk, a potential energy waiting to be transformed into a kinetic beauty. He feels the immense responsibility of the day ahead. He is to begin the gul-i-katai, the Chinese flower, a complex multi-layered peony motif that requires a mastery of sayarushan, or the play of light and shadow through subtle color gradations. He begins by preparing the dastgah, the loom environment, sweeping the stone floor with a bundle of dried herbs to clear the dust of the night. He then turns his attention to the pud, the weft threads that will be passed horizontally through the warp after each row of knots is tied. He must hand-spin the silk for the weft today, using a small wooden spindle that hums as it rotates. The thickness of the weft determines the bite of the carpet, how firmly the knots are locked into place. If the weft is too thick, the design will become distorted and elongated. If it is too thin, the carpet will be flimsy and prone to wear. He works the spindle with a rhythmic flick of his wrist, the silk thread forming a perfect uniform spiral. This preparatory work is just as vital as the weaving itself. It is the hidden foundation of the masterpiece. In 1602, the weaver knows that his reputation rests not just on the visible flowers, but on the invisible structural integrity that only another master would recognize. He is weaving for the eyes of the future, for a collector who might touch this silk 300 years from now and feel the strength of the craftsman's intent. The first rays of the sun finally strike the high windows, sending a spear of amber light directly onto the nagshe, the master pattern drawn on gridded paper. The weaver studies the grid, which is stained with the tea of decades. Every square represents a single knot, a single decision in a sea of millions. He picks up a skein of Osmani silk, a sky blue so pale it is almost white, and ties the first knot of the morning. The sound is a crisp, clean snap, the sound of a new day beginning. He works on the highlights of the peony petals, using a technique called hashur, where different colored threads are blended to create a soft, painterly transition. This is the most difficult part of the floral anatomy. The flower must appear as if it is caught in a moment of blooming, suspended between potential and reality. His hands move with a newfound vigor, the stiffness of the night replaced by the fluid heat of creation. The thud-clack of the iron comb returns to the room, a heartbeat that syncs with the awakening city outside. Each strike of the comb is a declaration of presence, a mark made in the ledger of history. If the expanded, meticulous detail of this 17th century workshop brings you a sense of grounding and mental clarity, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the weft that holds our storytelling together, allowing us to explore the profound beauty found in the slow, dedicated pursuit of excellence. We invite you to join the conversation in the comments. When you start a new day or a new project, what is the first knot you tie to ensure your work has a strong foundation? Is there a particular task that makes you feel connected to those who came before you in your professional hobby? We look forward to sharing in your stories of craftsmanship and continuity as we continue this journey through the silken gardens of the past. As the sun climbs higher, shedding its morning amber for a brilliant, piercing white, the workshop transforms into a theatre of vibrant optics. The weaver is now fully immersed in the Shah Abbasi border, a regal framing element that requires the use of zari silk, threads wrapped in microscopically thin ribbons of real silver and gold. This technique is the pinnacle of Safavid textile art, reserved for the carpets that would eventually grace the private chambers of the Shah, or be sent as royal gifts to the distant courts of Europe and the Far East. The metal-wrapped threads are stiffer and more recalcitrant than the pure silk. They require a different kind of finger strength and a constant, watchful eye to ensure the metal does not crimp or lose its luster as it is knotted. The weaver must maintain a perfect, even tension, for if he pulls too hard, the silver ribbon will snap, revealing the humble silk core beneath. He works with a slow, almost agonizing deliberation, his breath coming in shallow, rhythmic cycles that match the pace of his hands. Each golden knot is a tiny anchor of light, a promise of eternal spring captured in the cold, hard reality of metal and fiber. The heat of the late morning begins to draw the scent of the dyes out of the carpet, the musky, sweet aroma of saffron, the sharp, acidic tang of fermented indigo, and the deep, earthy richness of madder root. These smells are the weaver's constant companions, a sensory map of the geography of Persia. He thinks of the mountain villages where the wool was sheared, the coastal plains where the silkworms spun their cocoons, and the bustling bazaar stalls where the master dyers guarded their secret recipes with their lives. To the weaver, the carpet is a living history of the land itself. He pauses to adjust his position on the wooden bench, which has been polished to a high sheen by 40 years of his own movements. He reaches for a small bowl of dried mulberries, popping one into his mouth for a quick burst of natural sugar. The sweetness is a sharp contrast to the bitter dust of the workshop, a small indulgence that provides the mental fuel needed for the intricate interlacing he is about to begin. The geometry here is dizzying, a series of concentric spirals that must overlap without ever appearing cluttered, a visual representation of the complexity of the human soul. By the time the shadows of the arched windows begin to shorten toward the center of the room, the weaver has completed a section of the border that glitters with a cold, celestial fire. He leans back to examine his work from a distance, squinting his eyes to see the flow of the metallic highlights. At this angle, the silver threads catch the light and create a shimmering secondary pattern that seems to float a fraction of an inch above the surface of the wool and silk. This is the hidden garden, a layer of beauty that only reveals itself to those who are willing to wait for the light to move. He feels a surge of quiet, profound satisfaction. In the year 1602, in a world where everything is destined to fade, he is building something that defies the erosion of time. He picks up the heavy iron comb once more, its weight familiar and comforting in his hand. The thud clack resonates through the workshop, a sound of absolute certainty in an uncertain world. The city of Isfahan may change, empires may rise and fall, but the mathematical truth of his knots will remain, held fast by the tension of the warp and the dedication of his spirit. If the expanded, sensory journey into the heart of this ancient craft brings you a sense of deep, focused tranquility, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the silver thread that allows us to weave these long, immersive narratives, bringing the forgotten beauty of the past into the digital present. We invite you to reflect with us in the comments. Is there a hidden layer to your own work or your daily life? Something beautiful that is only visible when viewed from a certain perspective or at a certain time of day? How do you balance the need for structural strength with the desire for artistic brilliance in your own creative pursuits? We look forward to hearing your thoughts as we continue to explore the silken masterpieces of 17th century Persia. The high noon sun of 1602 Isfahan has turned the workshop into a crucible of stillness, where the only movement is the rhythmic dance of the weaver's hands and the slow, inevitable crawl of light across the stone floor. The weaver is now entering the most psychologically taxing phase of the carpet, the gere-hey kofte, or the hidden knots that form the transition between the vibrant floral field and the starker, more geometric inner guard borders. This section requires a tonal melt, where the colors must transition from a deep, saturated pomegranate red to a soft, dusty rose over the course of only 12 rows of knots. To achieve this, he must engage in a brash, the intentional blending of different dye lots to create a variegated painterly effect. He holds 3 different shades of silk in his left hand, selecting individual strands to create a hybrid thread that exists nowhere else in the carpet. It is a work of pure intuition. There is no pattern on earth that can dictate exactly how these colors should merge. He relies on his hashma-i-dil, the eye of the heart, to feel when the balance is right, ensuring the transition looks as natural as the fading light of a desert sunset. The atmosphere in the room has grown thick with the midday heat, yet the weaver's concentration acts as a cooling shroud around him. He is currently focused on a mahi fish motif, a tiny ancient symbol of life and fertility that is hidden within a larger leaf structure. Each fish is only 6 knots long, yet it requires 4 different colors of silk to give it a sense of motion. As he ties these knots, his fingers move with a dexterity that seems almost supernatural, a product of millions of repetitions that have transformed his tendons into fine-tuned instruments. He can feel the slight difference in the twist of the silk. Some threads are S-spun and others Z-spun, and he uses this microscopic texture to control how the light will hit the finished pile. In the silent heart of the Safavid Empire, this level of detail is not considered an obsession, it is a form of worship. To create something as perfect as possible is to honor the creator who provided the silk, the dyes, and the breath of life itself. The weaver's sweat drips onto the stone floor, far from the precious textile, each drop a silent testament to the physical price of a masterpiece. By the time the sun begins its slow, heavy descent toward the west, a new section of the lachak, the corner medallion, has emerged from the warp. This section features a series of bote motifs, the ancestral form of the paisley, which curve gracefully like frozen flames toward the center of the carpet. The weaver takes a moment to stand up, his spine emitting a series of soft rhythmic cracks that echo in the vaulted space. He walks to the far end of the room to view the work from a distance of 20 paces. From here, the individual knots disappear, and the carpet begins to sing its true song. The gold threads catch the shifting afternoon light, creating a shimmering lattice that seems to pulse with a slow, deep energy. It is a moment of profound revelation. The garden is no longer a collection of parts, but a unified, breathing landscape. He feels a sense of awe at his own creation, a humble recognition that he is merely the vessel through which this beauty is flowing. He returns to his bench with a renewed sense of purpose, picking up a skein of deep forest green to begin the shading of a cypress tree, his movements once again falling into the hypnotic, timeless rhythm of the thud-clack of the iron comb. If the expansive and intricate detail of this 17th century craftsmanship provides you with a sanctuary of focus and calm, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement is the foundation that allows us to continue building these long-form, immersive historical journeys, preserving the quiet beauty of a world that understood the value of the slow and the steady. We invite you to join our community in the comments. In your own life, do you have a hidden project or a secret detail in your work that only you truly understand? How does it feel to create something that requires a level of perfection that most people might never even notice? We look forward to exploring the depths of your own dedication as we continue our journey through the silken masterpieces of Isfahan. The afternoon air in the workshop begins to cool as the sun angles lower, but the intensity of the weaver's focus only deepens. He has reached the khatte-khattai, the sophisticated curved lines that define the skeleton of the entire garden. These lines act as the veins of the carpet, carrying the visual energy from the central medallion to the furthest corners of the borders. To execute these curves in a medium that is inherently grid-based is the ultimate test of a master. He must use a technique called offsetting, where he strategically places knots in a staggered formation to trick the human eye into seeing a perfectly smooth arc rather than a series of steps. He works with a thread of serene silk, a blue so deep it is often mistaken for black, to outline a grand sweeping vine. This dark outline acts as the the definition that prevents the vibrant colors of the flowers from bleeding into the background. As he pulls each knot tight, he feels the tension of the warp resisting him, a physical dialogue between the strength of the cotton and the elegance of the silk. In 1602, the weaver knows that if this curve is even a fraction of an inch off, the entire geometry of the 6-meter carpet will feel unbalanced, a silent disharmony that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The sensory environment of the workshop shifts as the shadows grow long and thin like the fingers of a giant reaching across the stone floor. The sound of the city outside has changed from the sharp clatter of midday commerce to the softer, more melodic calls of the evening bread sellers. Inside, the weaver's movements have become almost liquid. He is now working on the panjrang, a five-color blending technique used for the centers of the smallest lilies. He holds 5 different needles, each threaded with a different hue: pale cream, saffron peach, madder red, and a touch of olive. He weaves them in a tiny circular mosaic, creating a shimmer effect that mimics the way light dances on a real flower in the breeze. His eyes are inches from the warp, his breath rhythmic and low, a soft hiss that marks the passage of time. He thinks of the silk itself, which traveled hundreds of miles on the backs of camels to reach this room. He feels a deep responsibility to the thousands of lives, silkworms, farmers, dyers, and merchants, whose labor is now concentrated at the tips of his fingers. He is the final gatekeeper of their collective effort, the one who transforms their raw materials into a permanent legacy. As the light turns a bruised royal purple near the ceiling, the weaver begins to execute the touré, the complex interlocking of the background silk with the main motifs. This is often where lesser weavers lose their way, as the negative space is just as important as the flowers themselves. He must ensure that the indigo background is not a flat, dead color, but a vibrating field of light. To do this, he introduces subtle variations in the direction of the knots, creating a watered effect similar to moiré silk. He pauses for a moment to light a single tallow candle, its small flickering flame casting a warm amber glow on the section he has just completed. The transition is magical. Under the yellow light, the deep blues turn into velvet shadows, and the gold-wrapped threads begin to burn with a quiet internal fire. He leans back, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back. A good pain, he calls it, the physical evidence of a day spent in the service of beauty. He is tired, but his mind is clear, washed clean by the repetitive, meditative nature of the work. He knows that he has added another 1,000 knots to the history of his people, each one a tiny silken brick in the temple of Persian art. If the expanded rhythmic detail of this 17th century craftsmanship helps you find a sense of profound peace and mental restoration, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the heartbeat of our storytelling, allowing us to keep these ancient fires burning in the digital age. We invite you to share your reflections in the comments. In your own life, do you find that the negative space, the quiet moments between your big achievements, is just as important as the work itself? How do you maintain balance when you're working on a project that requires both immense strength and delicate precision? We look forward to reading your insights as we continue our journey through the eternal gardens of Isfahan. The final hour of the day arrives with a heavy velvet stillness as the sun disappears behind the Zagros Mountains, leaving a lingering streak of copper and violet across the high workshop windows. The weaver is now engaged in the sormedouzi of the secondary border, a meticulous process of outlining the gol-e-ana pomegranate flowers with a singular continuous line of dark navy silk. This line acts as the anchor for the entire composition. It must be as thin as a single hair, yet strong enough to define the explosive colors of the fruit's interior. To maintain this level of precision in the waning light, the weaver relies on lamzi-angostan, the wisdom of the fingertips. He no longer needs to see every warp thread with his eyes. His fingers have developed a sensory memory so profound that they can detect a misalignment of a fraction of a millimeter. He works in a state of zikr, a silent, repetitive remembrance, where each knot becomes a rhythmic prayer for patience. In 1602, the masterpiece is not a product to be sold, but a sanctuary to be inhabited, and the weaver moves through its silken corridors with the ease of a man walking through his own childhood home. As the workshop transitions into the deep blue of evening, the weaver prepares the gere-i-khatame, the closing knots of the day's section. Before he finishes, he must execute the roftegari, a process of manual leveling where he uses a small heavy iron block to gently compress the newly woven rows. The sound is a series of dull, resonant clunks that vibrate through the stone floor, signaling to anyone nearby that the day's creation is being sealed into history. He then picks up a pair of long, extremely sharp shears, specifically balanced for his hand, to perform the parduct, the initial shearing. With the steady hand of a surgeon, he clips away the stray fibers of the silk pile, revealing the crisp, clean geometry of the design beneath. This is the moment of revelation. As the fuzz of the raw silk falls away like colorful snow, the vibrant, crystalline structure of the garden emerges in all its glory. He watches as a tiny turquoise bird, hidden within a thicket of rose bushes, finally takes shape under his blades. The satisfaction he feels is not a loud joy, but a deep, tectonic shift in his soul, the knowledge that he has brought something permanent and perfect into a world of transience. The air in the workshop is now cool and carries the faint, sweet scent of the evening jasmine blooming in the courtyard outside. The weaver sets down his shears and takes a final long look at the loom. He notices how the moonlight, beginning to filter through the high vents, interacts with the zari gold threads he wove earlier. They do not just reflect the light, they seem to swallow it and emit a soft, ghostly glow of their own. He moves to the corner to fetch the heavy linen shroud, but his movements are slow, almost reluctant. Leaving the loom is like leaving a conversation mid-sentence. He carefully covers the carpet, ensuring the fabric is taut so no dust can settle into the fresh pile. He then attends to his tools, cleaning the iron comb with a cloth dipped in clove oil to prevent any hint of rust. This act of care is the final signature of a master, respect for the instruments that allow his spirit to manifest in the physical world. He steps toward the door, the stone floor cold beneath his feet, and feels the immense, silent weight of the 1602 night. Behind him the garden is asleep, its thousands of silken knots holding the secrets of the day in a state of perfect, patient suspension. If the expanded rhythmic detail of this 17th century craftsmanship helps you find a sense of profound peace and mental restoration, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the heartbeat of our storytelling, allowing us to keep these ancient fires burning in the digital age. We invite you to share your reflections in the comments. In your own life, do you find that the finishing touches, the cleaning of tools, or the tidying of a workspace are just as satisfying as the work itself? How do you transition from the intense focus of your day back into the quiet of your personal life? We look forward to reading your insights as we continue our journey through the eternal gardens of Isfahan. The moon is a sharp ivory crescent hanging over the silent minarets of Isfahan as the weaver returns home. But even in the stillness of his bed, his mind is back in the workshop weaving the Darya-i-Noor, sea of light patterns. He wakes before the muezzin's first call, his spirit already pulling him toward the loom. Returning to the workshop in the pre-dawn mist of 1602 feels like entering a sacred temple. As he pulls back the linen shroud, a faint, static crackle skips across the silk, a tiny spark of energy that seems to wake the garden. Today's task is the Gade-i-Sav, the towering cypress tree that will stand at the four corners of the central field. In Persian lore, the cypress is the tree of freedom and eternity, its evergreen nature a symbol of a life that does not fear the winter of time. To weave it, he must use sorme silk of varying depths, a dark midnight green for the shadowed core, and a bright emerald hue for the tips that catch the imaginary sun. He begins by checking the sheller warp tension one more time. The humidity of the night has tightened the cotton threads, making them hum with a higher, more expectant pitch. The morning progresses with a rhythmic intensity that blocks out the rest of the world. The weaver is now working on the Noki Morg, the bird's beak detail, a feature so small it consists of only 3 knots of coral-colored silk. To ensure the bird looks as though it is singing, he uses a technique of asymmetrical tensioning, pulling the middle knot slightly tighter to create a minute physical curve in the pile. This is the micro-architecture of the carpet. While the Sultan might admire the grand design from his throne, the weaver knows that the true life of the piece resides in these invisible nuances. His iron comb strikes the silk with a new resonance today, a deep hollow thump that indicates the carpet is becoming significantly denser. Each strike compacts the pud weft against the knots, locking the colors into a granite-like solidness. He feels a profound connection to the material. The silk is no longer just a thread, It is becoming a skin, a protective layer that will guard this garden of the mind for 500 years. He pauses to sharpen his knife, the whir of the whetstone, a sharp industrial melody that cleanses the silence of the room. As the sun reaches the midpoint of the high-arched windows, the workshop is flooded with a brilliant golden light that reveals the abrash he created yesterday. The subtle color variations in the background indigo look like the ripples on the Zayande River under a summer breeze. The weaver takes a moment to prepare a fresh pot of black tea, adding a single pod of cardamom and a small crystal of rock sugar. He watches the sugar dissolve, thinking of how his own life is dissolving into this carpet, knot by knot. He is not sad, rather he feels a sense of expansion. To be a weaver in the golden age of Shah Abbas is to be a bridge between the earth and the heavens. He returns to the loom and begins the bandi interlacing of the cypress branches. This requires him to cross-reference his Nagshe pattern map every few seconds, as the geometry here is a complex web of intersecting parabolas. His fingers move like silent spiders, weaving a web of beauty that is both fragile in its individual threads and invincible in its collective strength. The thud-clack of the comb becomes faster, more insistent, as he enters the flow, that rare state where the hand and the heart are no longer separate entities. If the expansive and detailed rhythm of this ancient craftsmanship brings you a sense of deep, meditative focus, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the thread that allows us to continue building these long, immersive historical narratives, preserving the quiet beauty of a time that valued patience above all else. We would love to hear from you in the comments. Is there a symbol or a motif in your own life, perhaps a family heirloom, a recurring dream, or a favorite natural element that represents eternity or resilience to you? How do you weave that meaning into your daily actions? We look forward to reading your reflections as we continue our journey through the silken masterpieces of 17th century Persia. The heat of the early afternoon in 1602 Isfahan brings a drowsy stillness to the streets, but inside the stone-cool workshop, the weaver is entering a state of high tensile concentration. He is now beginning the Eslimi-e-Mari, a serpentine vine motif that coils around the base of the cypress trees he began earlier. These vines are not mere decorations, they represent the fluid energy of the earth, and their curves must be so perfect that they appear to be moving when the viewer walks across the room. To achieve this kinetic silk effect, the weaver employs a secret of the master craftsman. He slightly varies the angle of the knots as they follow the curve. By tilting the pile toward the center of the medallion, he ensures that the light will hit the silk at different angles, creating a shimmering three-dimensional ripple. He works with a thread of zafaran silk, a yellow so intense it was dyed with the dried stigmas of thousands of crocus flowers. As he ties these golden knots, the workshop seems to brighten, as if he is weaving the very essence of the sun into the dark, indigo-shadowed garden. The silence of the room is punctuated by the rhythmic snip-snap of his curved shears. After every 3 rows of knots, the weaver performs a sadeh bafi, a preliminary leveling of the surface. He leans in close, his nose nearly touching the silk, smelling the faint metallic scent of the silver-wrapped threads and the earthy aroma of the wool foundation. He looks for any gere-i-kor blind knots that might have been tied too loosely. If he finds one, he does not simply pull it tight, he painstakingly unpicks the entire section and reweaves it. In the philosophy of 1602 Isfahan, a flaw hidden in the foundation will eventually manifest as a scar on the surface. He treats the carpet as a living body. Any tension in the bones, the warp, will result in a blemish on the skin, the pile. This level of meticulous care is why a Safavid carpet can survive for 5 centuries. It is built with an integrity that anticipates the wear of time and the weight of history. He takes a piece of pumice stone and gently rubs the back of the carpet, a process called kiz, which removes any tiny protrusions of cotton and makes the back as smooth as a polished wooden bowl. As the sun begins to shift, casting a pattern of honeyed light through the high-vaulted ceiling, the weaver reaches for a new palette of colors for the goli parvane, butterfly flowers, that flit between the cypress branches. He selects a vibrant cochineal red, a soft lilac dyed with grape skins, and a startlingly clear turquoise. This is the joyful stage of the weaving, where the somber geometry of the borders gives way to the playful organic chaos of the central field. His fingers, now moving with a rhythmic percussive speed, create a zip-zip-thud sound that echoes off the stone walls like a heartbeat. He thinks of the royal court where this carpet may one day lie, of the soft footsteps of courtiers and the heavy, measured tread of the Shah himself. He is creating a world of luxury, but his own world is one of austerity and discipline. This paradox does not bother him. He finds his wealth in the perfection of the curve and the brilliance of the dye. He is a master of the long view, understanding that his labor is a small sacrifice for a beauty that will outlast his own name. If the expanded, sensory-rich journey into the heart of this ancient Persian workshop provides you with a deep sense of calm and mental focus, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support acts as the vital tension in the warp of our storytelling, allowing us to continue weaving these long-form historical narratives for you. We invite you to join our community in the comments. When you're working on a long-term goal, how do you stay motivated during the hidden stages of the process that no one else sees? Do you find satisfaction in the internal integrity of your work, even if the final result is far in the future? We look forward to hearing your thoughts on the beauty of patience and the power of the craftsman's spirit as we continue our journey together. The late afternoon light of 1602 Isfahan begins to thicken, turning from a sharp gold into a heavy syrupy amber that pools in the dips and valleys of the silk pile. The weaver is now confronting the medakel, the sophisticated interlocking teeth that guard the boundary between the inner border and the main field. This is a region of high visual tension. The pattern must transition from the rigid, geometric repetition of the frame to the wild, scrolling fluidity of the central garden without a visible seam. To do this, he uses a technique of counter-knotting, where the background color of the border becomes the motif color of the field, and vice versa. It is a mathematical puzzle that requires him to keep two distinct mental maps in his head simultaneously. He works with a thread of mushki silk, a black so deep it was achieved by multiple dippings in fermented iron filings and pomegranate rinds. This black is not just a color, it is a structural shadow that gives the surrounding magentas and emeralds a luminous, neon-like quality. As he pulls the iron comb down with a decisive thud, he feels the entire 6-meter structure vibrate with a newfound solidity, as if the carpet is finally becoming conscious of its own grand design. The atmosphere in the workshop has reached a state of heavy aromatic saturation. The heat of the day has fully released the scents of the natural dyes, the peppery bite of madder, the sweet hay-like scent of weld, and the unmistakable clean smell of pure mountain water used in the final rinsing of the silk. The weaver's focus is so narrow that the sounds of the city, the call of the water seller, the braying of a distant donkey, the rhythmic hammering of the coppersmiths, become a single low-frequency hum, a white noise that pushes him deeper into his fana, the state of creative annihilation, where only the knot exists. He is currently weaving a shekeste, broken leaf, a motif that represents the transience of life. He intentionally introduces a slight asymmetry into the leaf's serrated edge, using 5 different shades of autumnal brown to suggest a hint of decay amidst the eternal spring of the garden. This is the hekmat wisdom of the Persian artist, to acknowledge that even in the most perfect palace of the Shah, time is a constant, quiet visitor. His hands move with a grace that hides the immense physical strain on his joints, a testament to a lifetime spent in the service of the loom. As the sun dips below the level of the high windows, casting the lower half of the loom into a cool charcoal shadow, the weaver begins the tahrir, the final outlining of the central medallion's lower quadrant. This is the heart of the carpet, the point from which all other designs radiate. He reaches for a skein of gol-e-bay quince flower silk, a delicate glowing orange pink that will form the inner glow of the medallion. He ties each knot with a deliberate, slow pull, ensuring the neck of the knot is perfectly seated against the warp. He knows that in the years to come, this carpet will be folded, rolled, and walked upon. His knots must be strong enough to resist the centuries while remaining soft enough to feel like a cloud under a bare foot. He takes a moment to wipe his eyes with a damp linen cloth, clearing the fine silk dust that has accumulated on his lashes. Looking at the day's progress, he sees 1,000 miniature stories told in thread: a bird's wing, a vine's curl, a flower's breath. He is exhausted, but the sight of the gold thread catching the last horizontal ray of light fills him with a quiet, indestructible energy. He is a man who has mastered the art of turning time into beauty, and as the 17th century night begins to reclaim the workshop, he knows he has built a garden that will never wither. If the expanded rhythmic detail of this master weaver's life provides you with a profound sense of grounding and mental restoration, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the weft that holds our historical narratives together, allowing us to explore the deep, quiet textures of the human spirit. We invite you to join the conversation in the comments. In your own work or creative life, how do you handle the boundaries, the transitions between different phases, projects, or moods? Do you find that these interlocking moments are where the most interesting details emerge? We look forward to reading your insights on the art of transition and the beauty of the long weave as we continue our journey through the silken masterpieces of Isfahan. As the moon reaches its zenith over Isfahan in 1602, a profound, heavy silence settles into the workshop, signaling the end of a journey that has spanned seasons and millions of breaths. The weaver has reached the khatameh, the final boundary of the carpet. This is not merely the end of the silk, but the locking of a legacy. He is weaving the zanjira, a rugged, chain-like finishing border that acts as the physical and spiritual anchor for the entire garden. Unlike the delicate flowers of the interior, these knots are tied with a reinforced core of camel hair and silk, creating a structural seal that will prevent the carpet from unraveling for centuries. His hands, though calloused and weary, move with a newfound reverence. He knows that every movement he makes now is the final signature on a masterpiece that will outlive his name, his children, and even the empire itself. The atmosphere in the room is thick with a sense of completion. The scent of the castor oil lamp mingles with the deep, earthy aroma of the finished pile. The weaver takes up the daftin, the heavy iron comb, for the last time. As he strikes the final row of weft, the sound is not a dull thud, but a resonant, bone-deep crack that echoes through the stone arches. It is the sound of a world being closed, a garden being perfected. He then performs the gire-i-akar, the master's knot, a complex hidden lock used only at the very end of royal commissions. As he pulls the thread tight, he feels a strange sensation, a mixture of immense relief and a quiet, hollow sadness. For months, this loom has been his pulse, his conversation with the divine. Now, the conversation is over. The silence that follows the final snip of his shears is the most profound sound he has ever heard. With a trembling hand, the weaver stands up and performs the roname, the unveiling. He cuts the tension of the heavy warp threads, and the carpet, for the first time in its existence, is free from the loom. It falls to the stone floor with a soft, heavy whoomp, a sound of pure substance. He rolls it out under the silver moonlight filtering through the high vents. The garden is breathtaking. The zari gold threads shimmer like liquid starlight. The indigo pools seem to ripple in the draught. The cypress trees stand tall and eternal. In the year 1602, in a small workshop in the heart of Persia, a piece of heaven has been anchored to the earth. The weaver kneels on the silk, his forehead touching the cool, soft pile in a final act of sajda, profound gratitude. He has finished his work. The garden is alive, and it is ready to begin its journey through time.
Sleepy History Tales is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes.
The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history. But they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation.
Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study.
By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep.
Thank you for your understanding and support.